I opened my eyes to flashing red lights, the maintenance alarm. Again, third time this week, the Bellagio's backup systems were glitching. I groaned, grabbing my radio and tool belt. Just another Tuesday in paradise, keeping the lights on in Sin City. "Ray, you reading me?" Static crackled through my handheld. Mike from security. "Yeah, I'm here. Let me guess, power fluctuations in the north wing again?" "Worse. Turn on any TV?" I frowned, swinging my legs off the break room couch and flipping on the small television mounted in the corner. Every channel showed the same thing. Breaking news banners, helicopter footage of what looked like an overturned truck on Highway 95, about 20 miles northwest of Vegas. Military vehicles surrounded it, confirmed the truck was transporting classified materials from the Nevada test site. Officials refused to comment on the nature of these materials, but sources close to the investigation suggest the vehicle belonged to the Centers for Disease Control. Mike's voice cut through my thoughts. "Management wants all hands. They're saying it might be some kind of terrorist attack." I snorted. "When isn't it? Tell them I'll check the backup generators. Last thing we need is a blackout with 5,000 people in the casino." I killed the TV and headed for the service elevator, my mind still on those military vehicles. The Nevada test site. Everyone in Vegas knew what that really meant. Area 51. The government could rename it all they wanted, but locals knew the truth. Whatever rolled out of there wasn't normal. The basement hummed with the massive generators that kept the Bellagio's Fantasyland running. I checked the gauges, voltage fluctuations, subtle but definitely there. Nothing catastrophic yet, but something was straining the grid. I radioed up to the control room. "Jen, you seeing these fluctuations citywide or just us?" A pause. "Whole strips reporting it, Ray. Power company says they're getting surges from the north. Some kind of interference. North, where that truck had crashed. Coincidence? I didn't think so." I spent the next hour checking connections, making minute adjustments. The hotel above me continued its mechanical ballet of slots, cards, and cocktails, blissfully ignorant. Vegas never stopped. Not for terrorists, not for anything. My radio squawked again. "Ray!" It was Mike, his voice tight with something I'd never heard before. Fear. "Get up here. Now." "What's happening?" "Just get to the main floor. Bring anything. Anything you can use as a weapon." I froze, wrench in hand. "A weapon? What the hell?" "Now, Ray!" I grabbed my heaviest flashlight and a pair of insulated cutters, shoving them into my belt before racing to the service elevator. When the doors opened on the casino floor, I stepped into chaos. Screams echoed across the cavernous room. Tourists ran in every direction, trampling each other. Security guards formed a perimeter around something near the central bar, their backs to me. "Mike!" I pushed through the crowd. "Mike!" One of the guards turned, not Mike, his face pale and sweating. "Stay back, Ray." But I could already see past him. A man in a blood-stained Hawaiian shirt was bent over a woman on the floor, his face buried in her neck. Blood pooled beneath them, spreading across the marble. Two security guards approached cautiously, tasers drawn. "Sir, step away from her now." The man looked up and I felt my stomach drop. His eyes were milky white, face smeared with blood and something darker. When he opened his mouth, a chunk of flesh fell from between his teeth. "Tase him!" someone shouted. The guards fired. The man convulsed but didn't go down. Instead, he lunged, inhumanly fast, grabbing one guard by the arm and tearing into it with his teeth. Blood sprayed across the casino's ornate ceiling. That's when the screaming truly began. I backed away, brain struggling to process what I was seeing. The fallen guard wasn't dead. He was convulsing, foaming at the mouth. The woman on the floor was twitching too, her movements becoming more coordinated by the second. My radio crackled. "Ray!" Mike's voice again. Where are you? Main floor, I whispered, unable to look away from the horror unfolding before me. Mike, there's people. They're attacking. It's everywhere. The whole strip. Get to somewhere secure. The infected guard was standing now, moving with jerky, uncoordinated steps. His eyes had already begun clouding over, bloody foam bubbling from his lips. He turned toward the crowd, lunging at an elderly woman who couldn't run fast enough. My brain finally caught up. I turned and ran for the service corridors, nearly colliding with a waitress fleeing in the opposite direction. "The back exits," she gasped. "They're coming in from the street." I grabbed her arm. "What about the security office?" "Second floor." She shook her head, tears streaming. "Overrun. I saw them tear Mike apart when he opened the door." Mike. I felt numb. "Come with me," I said, pulling her toward the service elevator. "The maintenance shafts have reinforced doors for fire safety." We raced through the suddenly alien landscape of the casino. The cheerful electronic chirping of slot machines provided a surreal soundtrack to the screams and chaos. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see similar scenes playing out across the strip. People running, fighting, falling. In the distance, a taxi had crashed into the fountain in front of the Venetian. The water was turning red. "What's happening?" The waitress, her name tag read Eleanor, sobbed as we ran. "What are those things?" "I don't know," I said, thinking of the news report. CDC truck, classified materials. "But I think it came from the crash site." We reached the service elevator, jammed the button repeatedly. Nothing. The power fluctuations had worsened. "Stairs," I said, pulling Elena toward the emergency exit. We burst into the stairwell, its concrete utility a stark contrast to the opulence we'd left behind. I could hear shouting echoing up from below. "Down or up?" Elena asked, eyes wide with terror. I hesitated. Down meant the generator room, secure, but with only one exit. Up meant the roof, exposed but with possibilities. I thought of the neighboring hotels, the connected walkways between some of the casinos. "Up," I decided. "We can cross to the Paris if we have to." We climbed, Elena's server heels clacking against the concrete steps. 2 floors up, the door banged open below us. Heavy, shuffling footsteps followed. "Faster," I hissed, taking Elena's hand. We reached the door to the roof, and I fumbled with my master key, hands slick with sweat. Behind us, the infected were gaining, 3, maybe 4 of them, moving with that same jerky coordination. Their moans echoed in the stairwell. The door finally opened, and we stumbled onto the roof, slamming it behind us. I wedged my screwdriver into the frame, hoping it would hold. What now? Elena was hyperventilating, mascara streaking down her face. I scanned the Las Vegas skyline, once so familiar, now transformed into a landscape of terror. Smoke rose from several buildings. A helicopter circled downtown, its spotlight sweeping across the streets. From our vantage point, I could see people running on the strip below, pursued by the infected. Cars crashed into each other as drivers tried to escape, and everywhere, those jerky, relentless figures converging on the living. "The Paris," I pointed to the neighboring hotel casino with its half-scale Eiffel Tower. "There's a maintenance bridge between our northern cooling tower and their south roof." We crossed the Bellagio's massive roof, ducking behind ventilation units when the helicopter passed overhead. I didn't know if they were looking for survivors or something else, but I wasn't taking chances. The maintenance bridge was exactly where I remembered, a narrow metal walkway spanning the 60-foot gap between buildings, never meant to be seen by the public. "I can't." Elena stopped, staring at the precarious crossing. "I'm scared of heights." "We don't have a choice." The scraping at the roof door had grown louder. My makeshift barricade wouldn't hold much longer. "I'll go first. Hold on to my belt." I stepped onto the bridge, trying not to look down at the alley far below. Elena whimpered, but gripped my work belt with white knuckles as we inched across. The metal swayed slightly with our weight. We were halfway across when the roof door finally gave. Infected casino workers in blood-smeared uniforms stumbled onto the Bellagio roof, heads swiveling until they spotted us. "Run!" I shouted, abandoning caution. We sprinted across the remaining length of bridge, the metal walkway clanging under our feet. The first infected reached the bridge just as we made it to the Paris roof. They showed no hesitation, no fear of the height, just relentless pursuit. The walkway bounced and swayed under their uncoordinated rushing. "We need to drop the bridge," I gasped, looking for the maintenance panel. There, a small control box near the connection point. I fumbled with my keys again, opening the panel to reveal a simple emergency disconnect. "What if there are other survivors?" Elena asked, watching the infected drawing closer. I hesitated, then looked at the chaos spreading across the city. Fires were breaking out everywhere. Police sirens wailed, but they seemed to be converging away from the strip, toward the outskirts of town. No one was coming to help us. "I'm sorry," I said, and pulled the lever. The bridge disconnected from our side with a mechanical groan, the far end still attached to the Bellagio. It swung down like a pendulum, infected tumbling off as it crashed against the side of the building. One managed to hold on, dangling 60 feet above the ground before losing its grip and falling to the alley below. Eleanor turned away. I couldn't. I watched as the thing hit the pavement, its body breaking on impact, but still moving, arms and legs twitching as it tried to right itself despite a clearly shattered spine. "These aren't people anymore," I whispered. "Whatever was in that truck, it's changed them. What do we do now?" Elena's voice was hollow. I scanned the Paris roof. Unlike the Bellagio, it had fewer access points, one main stairwell door and a service elevator housing. Both appeared secure for the moment. "We need to find out what's happening," I said, "and we need supplies. Water, food, weapons." "My brother's in Henderson," Elena said. "We should try to reach him." Henderson was on the outskirts of the city, miles away. With the streets in chaos, it might as well have been on the moon. But I nodded anyway. First things first. Let's get inside, find what we need. The Paris stairwell was clear, eerily quiet compared to the Bellagio. We descended cautiously, listening at each door before proceeding. The power here was already failing, emergency lights casting everything in a red glow. "Hello," I called out at the hotel floor level. "Anyone here?" Silence. Then a faint shuffling from down the hallway. We froze. "Back up," I whispered to Elena. But the sound wasn't approaching. It was moving away. I inched forward, peering around the corner. A man in a security uniform was dragging a body toward the elevators, leaving a dark smear on the carpet. He wasn't infected. His movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. "Hey!" I called, immediately regretting it. The man spun, drawing a pistol in one fluid motion. "Stay back!" he barked, aiming at my chest. I raised my hands. "We're not infected." We just came over from the Bellagio. He studied us, gun unwavering. He was young, maybe mid-20s, his Paris security uniform spattered with blood. "How'd you cross?" "Maintenance bridge. I'm Ray, head electrician at the Bellagio. This is Elena." He lowered the gun slightly. "Davis, security." He nodded at the body he'd been dragging, a woman in evening wear, her throat torn open. She turned while I was escorting her to safety. Had to put her down. "What's happening out there?" I asked. "We saw the news about a crashed truck." Davis laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that was just the beginning. They're saying it was some kind of weaponized virus. Terrorists hijacked a CDC transport from Area 51, crashed it deliberately. Within hours, infections were reported all over Clark County." He holstered his weapon. "National Guard's been deployed, but they're focused on containing it, not saving people. They've set up a perimeter around the city. So we're trapped. For now, they're evacuating the suburbs, But the strip is... He gestured vaguely. Well, you saw. My brother's in Henderson, Eleanor said, hope creeping into her voice. If they're evacuating, they're shooting anyone showing symptoms, Davis cut her off, and the symptoms don't always show right away. I saw them gun down an entire family when one kid had a nosebleed. My stomach twisted. So what's your plan? Davis considered us. I was heading to the security office. There's another guard there, Vance. We've been gathering supplies, weapons, planning to hold out until help comes or make a break for it if things get worse. Can we come with you? Elena asked. Davis hesitated, then nodded. More people means better chances, but I have to be clear. If either of you shows any symptoms, anything at all, I won't hesitate. Understood, I said, though the cold practicality of it chilled me. Lead the way. We followed Davis through the eerily empty hotel corridors. Most doors stood open, rooms hastily abandoned. Occasionally we passed signs of struggle, blood smears, overturned furniture. Twice we had to duck into rooms to avoid infected wandering the halls. They moved slowly when not actively pursuing prey, but their relentlessness was terrifying. No fatigue, no hesitation, just endless hunger. The security office was on the mezzanine level, overlooking the main casino floor. Davis used his keycard, then a manual key, then entered a code. We've secured it, he explained. Reinforced door, own generator, supplies. Inside, monitors lined one wall, showing camera feeds from throughout the hotel. Most displayed empty corridors or infected wandering aimlessly. One showed the casino floor, a nightmare of overturned tables and bloodstains. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some still moving. Vance sat at the console, a shotgun across his knees. He was older, 50s maybe, with grey hair and a hard set to his mouth. He barely glanced at us. Found more strays? He asked Davis. They came across from the Bellagio. Raise an electrician. Vance's eyebrows raised slightly at that. Electrician, huh? We could use you. Power grids failing all over the city. I nodded to the monitors. You have cameras on the outside? The strip? Vance typed commands, changing several feeds to exterior shots. I sucked in a breath. The famous Las Vegas Boulevard was unrecognizable. Abandoned cars, bodies, smashed storefronts. The infected moved in groups, converging whenever they spotted movement. Military vehicles blocked major intersections, soldiers standing guard. They're not letting anyone out, Vance said flatly. Orders came down an hour ago. Vegas is quarantined. That can't be right, Elena protested. There must be thousands of uninfected people still here. Millions, Vance corrected, and they're acceptable losses according to Uncle Sam. Whatever got out of that truck has them scared shitless. I studied the monitors, noting the military positions. They're creating a cordon containing the spread. Exactly, Davis said, so we're on our own, at least for now. What about communications? I asked. Cell networks? Radio? Cells went down first, Vance said. Too much traffic. We've got a radio, picks up emergency broadcasts and military chatter. They're being careful, but we've pieced together some of what's happening. He turned up a small radio on the desk. The voice was calm, professional, utterly at odds with its message. Remain in secure locations. Do not attempt to leave the containment zone. Military checkpoints have been instructed to use lethal force. Symptoms of infection include fever, disorientation, aggressive behavior, and bleeding from eyes, nose, or mouth. Infection rate is accelerated through bodily fluids, particularly saliva and blood. Transition time from infection to full manifestation varies from 10 minutes to 6 hours. 6 hours, I interrupted. So someone could be infected and not know it? Vance nodded grimly. That's why we've been careful about who we let in. I looked at Elena, who had gone pale. We'd been exposed to the infected at the Bellagio. Were we already carrying the virus? Is there a test? I asked. Some way to know. Nothing fast, Davis said. That's the problem. Military's supposedly working on it. But for now. He trailed off, the implication clear. Eleanor sank into a chair, hands trembling. We're going to die here. Not if I can help it, Vance said, surprising me with his sudden compassion. Look, I've been with Parasecurity for 15 years. I know this building inside and out, including ways out that don't appear on any map. We just need to wait for the right moment. What about other survivors? I asked, watching the monitors. There must be others hiding throughout the hotel. Davis and Vance exchanged glances. We've been monitoring the radio channels, Davis said carefully. A few groups have tried to organize. Most ended badly. The infection spreads too quickly in groups. One person turns, then everyone. So we're just going to hide here and let people die? The moral implications were starting to sink in. We help where we can, Vance said firmly. But smart, controlled, no unnecessary risks. I wasn't satisfied with that, but before I could argue further, Eleanor gasped, pointing at one of the monitors. A group of people, normal, uninfected people, were fighting their way through the casino floor, using improvised weapons against the infected that converged on them. We have to help them, she insisted. Davis hesitated, then nodded. I'll go. Ray, want to come? Extra hands might make the difference. I looked at the desperate faces on the screen. Yeah, give me a weapon. Vance handed me a fire axe. Don't get bitten, was his only advice. Davis checked his pistol, then led me through the secured doors and down to the casino level. We moved quickly but cautiously, using the service corridors where possible. How many people have you saved? I asked as we descended. 3 groups before you, about 20 people total. We've got them in the high roller suites on the top floor. Safer there, separate ventilation system in case this thing goes airborne. That hadn't occurred to me, and the thought sent fresh dread through my system. If the virus could spread through the air. We reached the casino floor and paused at the entrance. From here we could see the survivors, 8 of them, backing toward the main entrance where sunlight streamed in. They were surrounded by at least twice that many infected. We'll come at them from behind, Davis whispered. Clear a path to the emergency stairs. Ready? I gripped the fire axe, heart hammering. Ready? We burst onto the floor, Davis firing precise shots into the heads of the nearest infected. I swung the axe, trying not to think about the fact that these had been people hours earlier. The axe connected with horrible solidity, and I had to wrench it free as the body collapsed. This way, Davis shouted to the survivors. We have a safe place. They turned toward us, hope breaking across their exhausted faces. A man in a blood-spattered business suit was leading them, wielding a broken chair leg like a club. Thank God, he gasped. We've been fighting our way up the strip. The military's shooting everyone at the checkpoints. I know, Davis said grimly. Follow us. We formed a protective circle around the survivors. 3 women, 4 men, and a teenage boy, all showing various degrees of injury and exhaustion. The infected seemed drawn to our movement, converging from all directions. Move! I urged, swinging the axe to clear our path. We reached the emergency stairs, Davis ushering everyone through while I held the door. Ray! Davis suddenly shouted. Behind you! I turned to see an infected woman in a maid's uniform lunging for me. I raised the axe too late. Her weight slammed into me, driving us both to the floor. I held her back with the axe handle across her throat, her snapping teeth inches from my face. Bloody saliva dripped onto my cheek. A gunshot cracked, and the woman's head jerked backward. She collapsed on top of me, truly dead now. Davis stood with his smoking pistol, expression grim. You're exposed, he said as I pushed the corpse off and scrambled up. That's saliva! I wiped my face frantically. It didn't get in my mouth or eyes. I'm not infected. Davis's face remained impassive. We can't know that. One of the survivors, a woman in torn tourist clothes, stepped forward. I'm a nurse. The virus enters through mucous membranes or open wounds. If it just touched his skin and he doesn't have cuts there, he should be okay. Davis hesitated, then nodded. We need to move. More will come with the noise. We hurried up the stairs, the survivors gasping with relief as we reached the secured doors of the security area. Vance admitted us warily, eyeing the newcomers. They're clean, Davis assured him, but Ray had a close call. Saliva exposure. I'm fine, I insisted, though uncertainty gnawed at me. Would I know if I were infected? Would I feel it happening? Vance pointed to a bathroom off the main office. Clean up, thoroughly. We'll monitor you. I nodded, understanding the precaution. In the small bathroom, I scrubbed my face and hands raw with soap and hot water, examining my skin for any cuts or scratches that might have provided entry for the virus. Nothing obvious, but who knew what microscopic abrasions might be present? When I emerged, Elena rushed to hug me, then stopped herself. Are you okay? I think so, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The nurse said skin contact shouldn't infect me. The nurse, Alicia, she introduced herself, nodded. That's what we were told at the hospital. But be vigilant for symptoms. Fever comes first, then disorientation. Where did you all come from? I asked, changing the subject. The man with the chair leg, James, stepped forward. We were at a convention at the MGM. When everything went to hell, we tried to reach the airport, but it was overrun. Military's established checkpoints on all major roads out of the city, but they're not evacuating civilians. He swallowed hard. They're shooting anyone who approaches. We saw them execute an entire bus of tourists, another man added, his accent marking him as European. They're not taking chances with this thing spreading beyond Vegas. Vance nodded grimly. Makes strategic sense. Contain it at all costs. But they can't just sacrifice an entire city, Elena protested. They can, and they will, Vance said flatly. From their perspective, it's Vegas or the world. A heavy silence fell over the room. On the monitors, the infected continued their relentless wandering through the empty hotel. So, what now? James finally asked. We wait, Vance said. Monitor the situation. Look for a gap in their perimeter. The military can't maintain a perfect cordon forever. Eventually, they'll create extraction points for verified uninfected. And how do they verify that? Alicia asked skeptically. Vance shrugged. That's the million-dollar question. As night fell, we organized ourselves. The security office became our command center, while the connected break room and adjoining offices provided space for people to rest. Vance and Davis distributed their stockpiled supplies, energy bars, water bottles, first aid kits. Not enough for long-term survival, but enough to buy us time. I found myself drawn to the monitors, watching the transformation of Las Vegas. Without the constant maintenance of human hands, the city's famous lights were failing one by one. The Luxor's beam flickered and died. The dancing fountains at the Bellagio lay still. Electricity fluctuated across the grid as automated systems failed or tripped their emergency protocols. It's strange, Elena said, joining me at the monitors. I've lived here my whole life. Never seen the Strip go dark. Power grid's fragile, I explained, professional instinct taking over. Most casinos have backup generators, but they're designed for short-term outages, without technicians to maintain them. How long until everything goes dark? I considered. Major systems, maybe 48 hours. After that, just emergency lights running on batteries. A week at most before Vegas is completely dark. The idea was strangely apocalyptic. Las Vegas, the city that never slept, plunged into darkness. As if responding to my thoughts, a rolling blackout swept across the Strip. Block by block, the gleaming facades of casinos winked out. On our monitors, we watched the wave of darkness approach until it reached the Paris. The screens flickered, then stabilized as the hotel's emergency generator kicked in. That wasn't supposed to happen for days, I muttered. Vance appeared at my shoulder. Someone's shutting it down deliberately. Military, probably, trying to control movement. On cue, the radio crackled. All civilians in the Las Vegas containment zone. Power is being restricted to essential services only. Remain in your current locations. Do not attempt to reach checkpoints unless instructed. Martial law is in effect. Curfew begins at sunset. Anyone observed outside designated safe zones will be considered hostile and treated accordingly. Safe zones, James echoed. What safe zones? No one had an answer. We organized watch shifts through the night. I volunteered for the first, along with Davis and Alicia. As the others tried to rest, we monitored the feeds and the radio, piecing together the broader picture. It wasn't good. The virus, now being called the Vegas strain in military chatter, was spreading faster than anticipated. Infection rates approached 60% in areas closest to the original crash site. The incubation period varied wildly, making screening nearly impossible. And the infected themselves were showing concerning adaptations. They're getting faster, Davis noted, watching a group of them pursue a lone survivor across the Caesar's Palace forecourt. More coordinated. The virus is evolving, Alicia said grimly. That's what made it so dangerous to begin with. It was designed to adapt rapidly. Designed? I turned to her. You know something about this? She hesitated. Rumors at the hospital. Before communication went down, this wasn't just any CDC transport. It was coming from the bioweapons research facility at Area 51. Bioweapons? Davis looked skeptical. I thought that place was all UFO-s and conspiracy theories. The UFO stuff is the cover, Alicia said. My brother works security there. The real research is biological weapons, enhancements, cutting-edge genetic modification. This virus was supposed to be a miracle cure for neurodegenerative diseases. It could repair damaged neural pathways, regenerate dead tissue. What went wrong? I asked, though I could guess. Military application. They weaponized it, designed it to target specific genetic markers. But it mutated during testing, became something they couldn't control. The transport was moving it to a more secure facility when the attack happened. Who would attack a truck carrying something that dangerous? Davis wondered. Someone who didn't know what they were stealing, Alicia suggested, or someone who knew exactly what it was and wanted to use it. The implications hung in the air between us. If this was a deliberate attack, the infected roaming Vegas were just the beginning. There could be other samples, other targets. My watch shift ended at 2 a.m. I tried to sleep in one of the office chairs, but rest wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the infected maid lunging for me, felt her weight pressing me down, her teeth snapping inches from my face. Would I become like that? Was the virus already rewriting my brain, cell by cell? I must have dozed eventually, because Eleanor was shaking me awake as grey dawn light filtered through the high windows. "Ray, wake up! Something's happening!" I blinked groggily, then snapped to alertness. Everyone was gathered around the monitors. On the screens, military vehicles were moving through the strip in formation, not just Humvees now, but armored personnel carriers and what looked like mobile medical units. "They're setting up at the Venetian," Vance observed, "creating some kind of processing center." Sure enough, soldiers were establishing barricades and checkpoints around the massive hotel complex. Medical personnel in hazmat suits unloaded equipment. The radio crackled to life. "Attention all uninfected civilians. A secure extraction point has been established at the Venetian Hotel and Casino. Medical screening will be conducted prior to evacuation. Approach via Las Vegas Boulevard only, maintaining visible hands at all times. Any aggressive movement will be met with lethal force. Repeat, secure extraction at the Venetian." Hope surged through our group. Eleanor grabbed my arm. They're evacuating people. We can get out. It's 3 blocks from here, James said, already gathering his meager belongings. We could be there in 10 minutes. Wait, Vance held up a hand. Think this through. The streets are full of infected, and what kind of medical screening can they do on site that would detect the virus? Thermal imaging for fever, behavioral assessment, blood tests, Alicia suggested. It's not perfect, but nothing, Davis cut in. They shoot people for approaching checkpoints yesterday, and today we're supposed to trust them. This feels wrong. I studied the monitor, watching the methodical way the soldiers established their perimeter. I don't think we have a choice. Supplies won't last forever. This might be our only chance. Debate erupted, opinions divided. Half the group wanted to attempt the extraction immediately. Others shared Davis's suspicions. As they argued, I focused on the tactical problem. How to safely move 17 people 3 blocks through infected-filled streets. We need a diversion, I said finally, cutting through the debate. Something to draw the infected away from our route. Like what? James asked. I pointed to the monitor showing the casino floor. Sound attracts them. If we could trigger the fire alarm system in sections away from our exit route. It won't work, Davis interrupted. Power's down. Backup systems, I countered. Emergency alarms have battery backups, and I know how to access the control panels. Vance considered this. It could work. But we'd need someone to stay behind, trigger the alarms sequentially as we move. I'll do it, I volunteered, surprising myself. I know the systems best. Elena grabbed my arm. No! We go together. I'll circle back, I promised. Once you're all safely on your way to the extraction point, I'll follow. No one believed this, least of all me, but it was the only viable plan. If the virus was already incubating in my system, I was a danger to them anyway. We spent an hour preparing. I studied the building schematics, plotting alarm trigger points and a route to rejoin the others. Vance distributed the weapons, his shotgun to James, Davis keeping his pistol, makeshift clubs and knives for the rest. I kept my fire axe. We move at noon, Vance decided. Visibility will be best, and military presence at the extraction point should be established by then. As the others made final preparations, Eleanor cornered me in the break room. You're not planning to follow us, she said accusingly. I couldn't meet her eyes. I'll try. Don't lie to me, Ray. I saw how you've been checking yourself for symptoms. You think you're infected. I don't know, I admitted. But if I am, I can't risk exposing the rest of you. Especially not at an evacuation checkpoint. Tears welled in her eyes. So you're sacrificing yourself. I'm being practical. The alarms need to be triggered manually. Someone has to stay behind. It makes sense for it to be me. She shook her head. Nothing about this makes sense. I took her hand. In the short time we'd known each other, we'd formed a bond forged by trauma and survival. In another life, perhaps. Your brother's in Henderson, I reminded her. You need to get to him. She squeezed my hand. Be careful. And follow when you can. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. At noon, we gathered at the emergency exit that would take us to a side street, less exposed than the main entrances. Vance reviewed the plan one last time. Ray triggers the first alarm to draw infected away from our exit. We move as a group to the next block. Second alarm draws them north while we continue east. Third alarm as we approach the Venetian. No stopping, no separating, no heroics. Clear? Everyone nodded grimly. I checked my watch, synchronized with the others. I'll trigger the first alarm in 3 minutes, wait for the infected to clear, then go. With final nods, I left them, moving quickly through the service corridors to the fire control panel near the main casino floor. I checked my watch, then triggered the alarm. Immediately, ear-piercing claxons filled the building. On a nearby monitor, I could see the infected responding, moving toward the sound. I counted to 30, then radioed Vance. Route should be clear. Go now. "Moving," came the terse reply. I waited, heart pounding, until Vance confirmed they'd exited safely and were proceeding to checkpoint 1. Then I sprinted to the next alarm panel, located in the convention center wing. Another trigger, another ear-splitting noise. On the monitors, I watched infected streaming toward the new distraction. "Checkpoint 1 clear," Vance's voice crackled. "Moving to 2. I was sweating now, adrenaline pumping as I navigated the increasingly unfamiliar parts of the hotel. The third alarm panel was in the shopping arcade, dangerously close to where I'd last seen a concentration of infected. I reached it just as Vance radioed, "Checkpoint 2 clear," ready for final diversion. I triggered the alarm, then froze as a shuffling sound came from behind a nearby kiosk. An infected security guard emerged, milky eyes fixing on me with uncanny precision. I raised my axe as it charged, swinging just in time to catch it in the shoulder. The blade stuck, and I lost my grip as the creature fell backward. Now weaponless, I turned to run, directly into another infected. I barely had time to register the business suit, the convention badge still dangling from its neck, before it slammed me against the wall. I fought desperately, holding it back by the throat, but its strength was inhuman. "Final checkpoint clear," Vance's voice came from the radio clipped to my belt. "Ray, status?" I couldn't respond, using every ounce of strength to keep snapping teeth from my face. My free hand scrabbled against the wall, searching for anything to use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a fire extinguisher mounted nearby. With a surge of desperate strength, I ripped it free and swung it at the infected's head. The heavy metal connected with a sickening crunch, and the creature staggered back. I didn't hesitate, bringing the extinguisher down again and again until it stopped moving. Gasping, I retrieved my radio. "Still, here," I managed. "Proceed to extraction." "We're at the perimeter," Vance reported. "Military's processing people, medical screening, then buses. We're in line now." "Good," I said, retrieving my axe from the fallen security guard. "I'll try to join you." "Be careful," Elena's voice this time. "The infected are everywhere between here and there." I didn't respond. We both knew my chances were minimal. Instead, I checked the monitor in a nearby security station. It showed the Venetian perimeter, where my group was now queued among hundreds of other survivors. Military efficiency was evident. People moved through checkpoints, were scanned by handheld devices, then directed to buses or to a separate containment area. Something about the latter made my skin crawl. Those who failed the screening weren't being treated. They were being detained behind barricades, guarded by soldiers with fingers hovering near triggers. I zoomed the camera, focusing on the medical screening. Blood samples, temperature checks, pupillary response testing. Thorough but fast. Too fast for comprehensive virus detection if what Alicia had said was true. As I watched, James reached the screening point. The handheld scanner passed over him, flashed green. He moved to the buses, then Eleanor stepped forward. The scanner hovered over her, hesitated, and flashed red. My heart stopped. Soldiers immediately grabbed her, directing her not to the containment area, but to a separate, smaller group. I cranked the volume, trying to hear what was happening. A medical officer was explaining something, pointing to the scanner, then to his clipboard. "False positives possible. Secondary screening will confirm." The radio crackled, Vance's voice urgent but hushed. "Ray, something's wrong." "They're separating people after initial screening. Elena failed, but she's showing no symptoms." "I'm watching," I replied. "Stay with her if you can." "I'll try, but they're moving people through quickly." I kept my eyes on the monitor as our group progressed through screening. Vance passed. Davis failed and joined Elena in the secondary screening group. Alicia passed. Others were split seemingly at random. Then I noticed a pattern. Those who passed were predominantly tourists, out-of-towners with convention badges, vacation clothes, hotel keycards visible. Those who failed tended to be locals, casino workers, Vegas residents. It wasn't about symptoms at all. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't an evacuation, it was a purge. They weren't testing for the virus. They were separating locals from tourists. The tourists would be evacuated and monitored. The locals... I grabbed the radio. Vance, it's a trap. They're not screening for the virus. They're separating locals from tourists. You need to get Elena and Davis out of there. Static answered me. I tried again, desperation mounting. Vance! Do you copy? Nothing. They were either out of range or their radios had been confiscated. I had to reach them. Abandoning caution, I left the security station and ran for the nearest exit, axe ready. The streets were chaos. Abandoned vehicles, debris, wandering infected. I ducked from cover to cover, avoiding detection when possible, dispatching infected with quick, silent axe blows when necessary. 3 blocks had never seemed so far. By the time I reached the perimeter of the Venetian, my shirt was soaked with sweat and blood, mostly not mine. I crouched behind an overturned taxi, assessing the situation. The military had established a formidable perimeter, concrete barriers, razor wire, armed soldiers at regular intervals. Buses were being loaded with the cleared survivors, while the secondary screening group was being moved toward what looked like detention facilities, converted ballrooms or convention spaces inside the Venetian. I spotted Eleanor among them, Davis at her side. Both looked confused and frightened, but physically unharmed. Vance was nowhere to be seen, already evacuated perhaps. I needed a distraction, something to create chaos at the checkpoint without endangering the survivors. My eyes fell on an abandoned fuel truck, half hidden in an alley across from my position. An idea formed, dangerous, potentially suicidal, but it might work. Moving carefully, I made my way to the truck. The keys were gone, but that didn't matter. I climbed underneath, axe in hand, and located the fuel line. One good cut, and diesel began pouring onto the asphalt. I retreated to a safe distance, then found a discarded cigarette lighter in a nearby souvenir shop. The fuel had created a sizable pool now, flowing toward the checkpoint. I flicked the lighter, said a quick prayer, and tossed it. The flame caught instantly, racing along the fuel trail toward the truck. I barely had time to dive behind a concrete planter before the vehicle exploded with a deafening roar, sending a fireball into the sky. Chaos erupted at the checkpoint. Soldiers ran toward the explosion, weapons raised. The survivors panicked, some running for the buses, others scattering. The secondary screening group, momentarily forgotten, milled in confusion. It was now or never. I sprinted from my hiding place, keeping low, heading straight for Eleanor and Davis. A soldier spotted me, shouted a warning, but his attention was diverted by the burning truck. "Elena!" I reached her, grabbing her arm. "Davis!" "This way." Their eyes widened in shock. "Ray!" Elena gasped. "What are you—" "No time," I cut her off. "They're not evacuating locals, they're detaining them. We need to go." Davis didn't need to be told twice. "This way," he said, leading us toward a service entrance of the Venetian. "I worked here 3 years ago. I know the back exits." We ran, using the continuing chaos as cover. Gunshots rang out behind us, whether aimed at us or at the infected drawn by the noise and commotion, I couldn't tell. We reached the service door, Davis frantically trying his security card. "It's not working!" he hissed. I pushed him aside, wedging my axe into the doorframe and leaning my weight against it. The lock splintered and we tumbled inside, slamming the door behind us. We found ourselves in a dim service corridor, emergency lights casting everything in red. Davis oriented himself quickly. "This way. There's a tunnel connecting to the palazzo. If we can reach it, we might find a way past the perimeter." We moved quickly, the sound of chaos still audible behind us. Elena gripped my hand tightly. "I thought you weren't coming," she whispered. "Couldn't leave you," I said simply. Davis stopped suddenly, holding up a hand. Voices echoed from around the corner, deep, authoritative. "Military. Sweep the building. Shoot anything that moves. We can't risk contamination." "Sir, there are still civilians." Those are your orders, Corporal. Vegas is being written off. Operation Firebreak begins at sunset. Davis pulled us into a supply closet, closing the door softly as Boots marched past. When they faded, he turned to us, face pale. Operation Firebreak, he repeated. That doesn't sound good. We need to find Vance and the others, Elena insisted. Warn them. I shook my head. They're already on the buses. Best case, they're being evacuated safely. Worst case. I couldn't finish the thought. The tunnel. Davis refocused us. It's our only chance now. We continued through the service areas, avoiding both military patrols and the occasional infected. The Venetians' famous canal areas were eerily silent, the water stagnant without the pumps to circulate it. Gondolas floated abandoned, some overturned, one containing a body I tried not to look at too closely. Almost there, Davis whispered as we reached a maintenance door marked Palazzo Access, authorized personnel only. The door was locked. Keycard access again. I readied my axe, but Davis stopped me. Too loud. Let me try something. He examined the keycard reader, then pulled out his own Paris card. These systems are all networked. After the MGM hack last year, they implemented a universal emergency access protocol. He swiped his card, then quickly pressed a sequence of numbers on the keypad. To my surprise, the door clicked open. How did you... Security convention. Davis grinned tightly. You learn things? The tunnel was utilitarian, concrete walls, pipes and conduits running along the ceiling, emergency lights at regular intervals. We moved quickly, listening for any sound of pursuit. What was that about Operation Firebreak? Elena asked as we walked. What are they planning? Nothing good, Davis replied. The military doesn't use terms like that for standard evacuations. A terrible suspicion was forming in my mind, but I kept it to myself for now. We needed to focus on escape. The tunnel ended at another keycard door. Davis repeated his trick, and we emerged into the palazzo's back-of-house area. It was quieter here, away from the main extraction point, but evidence of chaos remained, overturned furniture, blood smears, abandoned belongings. Where now? Elena asked. Davis consulted a wall-mounted emergency plan. North exit might be our best bet. Its service only might not be as heavily guarded. We made our way through the empty hotel, alert for any movement. As we passed the casino floor, I glanced out the windows at the Strip. The sun was lowering toward the western hills, sunset approaching. Whatever Operation Firebreak was, we were running out of time. The north service exit was unguarded, but for good reason. A chain-link fence had been erected 20 feet beyond it, topped with razor wire and bearing military warning signs. Beyond the fence, soldiers patrolled in pairs. Now what? Elena whispered. I examined the fence line, noting where it connected to the building. There, I pointed to a section where the fence met an exterior wall. The anchoring looks weak. If we can pry it loose. Davis nodded. Worth a try. We approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows. Using my axe as a lever, I worked at the fence post while Davis kept watch. Elena helped, pulling at the chain links as they loosened. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, we created an opening barely large enough to squeeze through. Davis went first, then helped Eleanor through. I was halfway through when a shout came from our left. Hey! Stop right there! A military patrol had spotted us. I pushed through the fence as the soldiers raised their rifles. Run! I shouted, pulling Elena toward the nearest cover, an abandoned construction site across the street. Gunfire erupted behind us. Davis cried out, stumbling, but kept moving. We reached the skeletal framework of the half-built hotel, ducking behind concrete pillars as bullets pinged around us. Davis! Elena crouched beside him, examining the wound in his leg. How bad? Through and through, he grimaced. I can move. I peered around the pillar. The soldiers were approaching cautiously, using standard tactical movement. They weren't taking chances. These weren't infected to them, but escaping civilians who might carry the virus. "We need to split up," I said grimly. "I'll draw them off. You two head north toward the desert, if you can reach the mountains." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "We stay together." Davis nodded agreement, though his face was pale with pain. "No splitting up. That's how people die in horror movies." Despite everything, I almost laughed. "Fine, but we need to move deeper into the construction site. Use the levels, try to lose them." We moved as quickly as Davis's injury allowed, climbing half-finished staircases, crossing exposed floor plates. The soldiers followed, but more cautiously now, aware of the unstable environment. As darkness fell, we gained an advantage. They hadn't expected a prolonged pursuit and lacked night vision equipment. We reached the top floor, 15 stories up, open to the sky, offering a panoramic view of Las Vegas as the last light faded, and what I saw confirmed my worst fears. Military helicopters circled the perimeter of the city. Vehicles were withdrawing from checkpoints, pulling back to a new defensive line miles from the Strip. The extraction buses were long gone, and throughout the city, small teams of soldiers were placing devices at strategic points: tall buildings, power substations, water treatment facilities. "Operation Firebreak," I whispered. "They're going to destroy the city." Elena and Davis joined me at the edge, taking in the horrifying tableau. "They can't," Elena protested weakly. "There must be thousands of people still alive in there." "Acceptable losses," Davis quoted grimly, "containing the infection at all costs." A sound behind us, boots on concrete. The soldiers had caught up. We turned to find 4 of them, rifles raised. "On your knees!" the leader barked. "Hands behind your heads." We complied slowly. There was nowhere to run. "Sir," one soldier spoke into his radio, "we've apprehended 3 civilians attempting to breach the perimeter." Awaiting instructions. The radio crackled. I couldn't hear the response, but the soldier's face told me everything I needed to know. "Understood," he said, his voice flat. The squad leader looked at us, something like regret crossing his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "Containment protocol is absolute. No exceptions." "Wait," I said desperately. "The extraction. Those people you screened. What happens to them?" He hesitated. "Tourists are evacuated to quarantine facilities, monitored for symptoms." "And locals?" Davis pressed. The soldier didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You're executing us all," Eleanor realized. "The whole city." "It's the virus," the soldier said defensively. It's changing, adapting too fast. The scientists can't get ahead of it. The only option is containment and—" He swallowed. "Sterilization." "You mean annihilation," I said. He didn't deny it. A sudden explosion lit up the sky to the east, the first charges of Operation Firebreak detonating. The ground shook beneath us. The soldiers turned instinctively toward the blast, and in that moment of distraction, Davis moved. Despite his wounded leg, he lunged at the nearest soldier, tackling him with desperate strength. The man's rifle discharged, the shot going wild. I reacted instantly, diving for another soldier's legs as Elena scrambled for cover. Chaos erupted on the narrow platform. In close quarters, the soldiers' rifles were unwieldy. I grappled with my opponent, fighting for control of his weapon. Davis had his man pinned, landing punches with savage intensity. A gunshot cracked, and Davis jerked backward, a red stain blossoming on his chest. The squad leader stood with his pistol extended, already shifting aim toward me. I rolled, narrowly avoiding the next shot, and came up against the edge of the floor. 15 stories of empty air yawned behind me. The soldier advanced, weapon steady. "Stop!" Elena's voice rang out. She had somehow acquired one of the rifles and was pointing it at the squad leader. Her hands shook, but her stance was determined. "Drop it!" The remaining soldiers froze, calculating their chances. 4 against 1 untrained civilian with a rifle she might not know how to use properly. "Elena," I said quietly, "run. Now. While you can." She glanced at me, anguish in her eyes. Below us, another explosion rocked the city. Operation Firebreak was accelerating. "I'm not leaving you," she insisted. The squad leader made his decision. "Fire!" he ordered his men. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The soldiers raised their weapons. Elena's finger tightened on her trigger. I launched myself from my position, not toward safety, but toward her, trying to knock her clear of the inevitable fusillade. Gunfire erupted. I felt impacts. Once, twice, a burning sensation spreading through my chest. I collided with Elena, momentum carrying us both toward the edge. Her rifle discharged, the shot going wild, and then we were falling. The world spun around us. 15 stories became 14, became 13. Wind rushed past my ears. Elena's scream seemed distant, drowned by the roaring in my head. 12 stories, 11, then impact, not with the ground, but with something solid yet yielding. We crashed through the ceiling of a partially completed floor, scaffolding breaking our fall before depositing us roughly on concrete. Pain exploded through my body, but somehow I was still conscious, still alive. Elena lay beside me, groaning but moving. "Ray?" "Here," I gasped, each breath sending fresh agony through my bullet-riddled chest. "Can you move?" She sat up gingerly, taking stock of her injuries. "I think so. Nothing feels broken. You?" I tried to rise and failed, coughing up blood. "Not great." Her eyes widened as she saw the spreading stain on my shirt. "Oh God, Ray, you're hit." "Multiple times," I confirmed unnecessarily. "Listen, you need to go. Now. Get as far from the city as you can." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, tears streaming down her face. "Elena." I grasped her hand with what strength I had left. "I'm not going to make it. We both know that. But you still have a chance." Another explosion, closer this time. The building shuddered. Operation Firebreak was methodically destroying Las Vegas, sector by sector. "Henderson," I reminded her. "Your brother. Remember?" She nodded, squeezing my hand. "I remember. Go to him. Tell people what happened here, what they did to us." She bent down, pressing her forehead to mine. "I will. I promise." "The service tunnel," I gasped, feeling my strength ebbing. "By the loading docks. Might lead outside the perimeter." Elena kissed me once, gently, then pulled back. "I'll find it." "Go," I urged, as another explosion rocked the building. She stood, hesitating one last moment, then disappeared into the darkness of the unfinished floor. I lay back, staring at the stars visible through the hole we'd created in our fall. My body felt increasingly distant, the pain receding to a dull throb. I knew what that meant. Shock, blood loss, the approaching end. Around me, Las Vegas was being systematically destroyed, the city of light and life becoming a necropolis. Operation Firebreak was succeeding. The infection would be contained at the cost of countless innocent lives. People who had woken up that morning thinking of nothing more than winning at blackjack or seeing a show were now just collateral damage in a biological war. I thought of Elena, hoping she would find her way out, find her brother, find some kind of life after this nightmare. I thought of Vance and Alicia and the others from our group, wondering if they'd truly been evacuated or if the buses had been just another form of containment. The explosions were drawing closer, working their way up the strip. Soon they would reach this unfinished tower, and what remained of Raymond Maldonado, electrician, would become part of the scorched earth left behind. As my vision darkened around the edges, I saw movement in the shadows of the floor. Shuffling, uncoordinated movement. The infected had found me, drawn perhaps by the scent of blood or the noise of our fall. They emerged into the starlight, a dozen or more, their milky eyes fixing on me with that terrible hunger. Casino workers, tourists, a child among them, all reduced to shambling carriers of the virus that had destroyed our city. I had no strength left to fight, no weapon, nowhere to run. As they closed in around me, I closed my eyes, hoping Elena had found her way clear, hoping this nightmare would die with Las Vegas. The last thing I heard was the wail of air raid sirens, signaling the final phase of Operation Firebreak. The last thing I felt was hands grasping at my broken body, teeth tearing into flesh too numb to register pain. The last thing I thought was that Vegas had always been a city of hunger, for money, for pleasure, for escape. Now it hungered for flesh and blood, consuming itself from within as the military consumed it from without. The house always wins. That's what they say in Vegas. And as darkness claimed me finally and completely, I understood at last what the house truly was. Not the casinos with their glittering facades, but death itself, patient and unyielding, waiting for all of us to place our final bets. The lights went out in Las Vegas that night. All of them. Forever. The next stories I woke to the sound of my alarm, blissfully unaware that today would be my last normal day in Seattle. The rain drummed against my apartment window, a constant companion in this city. I fumbled for my phone, silencing the alarm before reluctantly rolling out of bed. My name is Mike Delaney, and I've worked the docks at Pier 46 for the past 8 years. Nothing special about me, just another blue-collar guy trying to make ends meet in an increasingly expensive city. The morning ritual was the same as always. Shower, coffee, toast. The news played in the background. Something about military exercises near Area 51, protests about secret medical testing. Just white noise as I laced up my steel-toed boots. I grabbed my raincoat and headed out, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. My sister Sarah and her kid were counting on me since her husband took off. Family's all that matters in the end. The bus ride to the pier was uneventful. I nodded to familiar faces, other dock workers heading to their shifts, their expressions mirroring my own weariness. We were the invisible machinery that kept the city running, moving cargo from ships to trucks, keeping commerce flowing. Nobody ever thinks about us until something goes wrong. When I arrived at the terminal, something felt off. There was an unusual tension in the air. Dave, my supervisor, was arguing with a guy in a suit. Not the usual shipping company rep, but someone more official-looking. Government, maybe. "What's going on?" I asked Ray, my partner for the day. Ray shrugged, lighting a cigarette. "Some special shipment coming in. High security. They're being real hush-hush about it." The cargo ship had docked early morning. The Triton Star, registered out of San Diego. Nothing remarkable about it except for the armed guards that stood at the gangplank. That was new. Dave waved me over, his face tight with stress. "Mike, you and Ray are handling a special container today. Biofreight from some research facility in Nevada. Everything sealed, all paperwork's in order, but they want it moved to the secure warehouse ASAP." "Biofreight? Like medical stuff?" I asked. "Above my pay grade," Dave replied. "Just handle it carefully and follow protocol." The container was unmarked except for a series of numbers and a small biohazard symbol in the corner. As the crane lowered it onto the dock, I noticed one of the guards watching us intently, not just observing, studying. I didn't like it. Ray and I used the forklift to move the container toward the warehouse. That's when we heard the first sound, a dull thump from inside. We both stopped. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Ray nodded, his face pale. Probably just shifting cargo. Another thump, louder this time, followed by what sounded like scratching. "That ain't normal," I said, stepping back from the container. The suited man appeared suddenly beside us. "Is there a problem?" "Something's moving in there," I said. "Impossible," he replied too quickly. "Continue with the transfer." As we approached the warehouse, I noticed the seal on the container had been damaged. Not broken completely, but compromised. A thin trickle of dark fluid leaked from one corner. "We should report this," I said to Ray. Before he could respond, a commotion broke out by the ship, shouting, then screaming. We turned to see one of the dock workers staggering toward us, something wrong with his movements, jerky and uncoordinated. Behind him, two of the armed guards were restraining another worker who appeared to be having some kind of seizure. "What the hell?" Ray muttered. The staggering worker collapsed about 20 yards from us. One of the medics on duty ran to help him. As the medic leaned over him, the fallen worker suddenly lunged upward, his mouth clamping onto the medic's neck. Blood sprayed in an arc across the concrete. "Jesus Christ!" I yelled, backing away. Everything devolved into chaos. The man who had been seizing broke free from the guards and bit one of them on the arm. The suited man was shouting into a radio, calling for containment and backup. Ray grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here now." We ran toward the warehouse office. Behind us, more screams erupted. Through the office windows, we watched in horror as the infection, because that's clearly what it was, spread with terrifying speed. The bitten turned within minutes, attacking others with mindless aggression. "It's like those fucking zombie movies," Ray whispered. I was already on my phone trying to call Sarah. No answer. I tried again, my hands shaking. Nothing. "The network's jammed," Ray said, checking his own phone. Dave burst into the office, his shirt torn and bloody. "They're blocking the exits. Military's rolling in. They're saying it's some kind of containment protocol." "Containment? People are dying out there," I shouted. "They don't care," Dave said grimly. "Whatever was in that container, they're more worried about it spreading than saving us." I looked out the window again. The scene had worsened. At least a dozen workers were down, either dead or transformed into those mindless attackers. The armed guards were shooting now, but aiming for heads only, confirming my worst fears. They knew exactly what this was. "We need weapons," I said. Ray nodded toward the maintenance area. Crowbars, wrenches, better than nothing. Armed with a crowbar and a determined desperation, I followed Ray and Dave toward the back exit. We had to get out before the military sealed the entire port. My thoughts were consumed by Sarah and her 6-year-old son, Ethan. I had to reach them. We made it halfway across the loading area when we encountered the first of them, Jenkins from the afternoon shift. His eyes were bloodshot, skin pale, mouth smeared with blood. He lurched toward us with a guttural moan. I hesitated, but Dave didn't. He swung a wrench, connecting with Jenkins' head. The sickening crack made my stomach turn, but Jenkins went down. "Don't think about it," Dave said. "That's not Jenkins anymore." We fought our way to the perimeter fence. Military vehicles were arriving, soldiers in hazmat suits establishing a cordon. They weren't letting anyone through, infected or not. "They're going to kill everyone," Ray realized aloud. A soldier spotted us and raised his rifle. "Return to the main building for processing and evacuation." "Like hell," Dave muttered, and made a break for a gap in their line. The gunshot was deafening. Dave fell mid-stride, a bloom of red spreading across his back. Ray pulled me behind a stack of pallets as more shots followed. "They're not containing it," I said, the reality sinking in. "They're covering it up." Night was falling as Ray and I remained hidden, watching the systematic execution unfold. Anyone showing symptoms was shot immediately. The rest were herded into the warehouse. From our vantage point, we could see that no one was being evacuated. "We swim for it," Ray decided, nodding toward the dark waters of Puget Sound. "It's our only chance." The cold water hit me like a physical blow as we slipped in from beneath the pier. We swam quietly, staying close to the pilings until we were well away from the lights and chaos of the terminal. The city skyline glowed ahead, still normal, still unaware of what had been unleashed. We dragged ourselves onto a small maintenance dock about a mile south. Ray was coughing badly, his breathing labored from the frigid swim. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but I noticed something alarming. A small wound on his arm, not fresh, but recent. Maybe from our escape through the loading area. "Ray, your arm." He looked down at it, then back at me, his expression grim. I didn't want to say anything. Figured I'd at least get out first. "Maybe it's not. Maybe you're immune or something," I offered weakly. Ray smiled sadly. "We both saw how fast it works." He pulled a folding knife from his pocket. "Do me a favor, Mike. Don't let me turn into one of those things. I can't. You have to. Find your sister. Protect her and the kid." I watched helplessly as Ray's condition deteriorated over the next 20 minutes. His skin grew pale, veins darkening beneath the surface. When his eyes began to glaze over, he handed me the knife. "Now, brother. Do it now." I closed my eyes as I drove the blade into his temple. Quick, merciful. I owed him that much. Alone now, I made my way through the dark streets towards Sarah's apartment in Belltown. The city seemed eerily normal, people still going about their evening routines, unaware of the nightmare unfolding at the port. But I noticed an increased police presence and military vehicles moving with purpose toward the waterfront. My phone had service now, but Sarah still wasn't answering. I tried her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who picked up on the fourth ring. "Mrs. Chen, it's Mike, Sarah's brother. Is she home?" "Mike?" "Yes, she's here, but she's sick. She came home early from work with a fever. I'm watching Ethan while she rests. My blood ran cold. Don't go near her. Keep Ethan away, I'll be there in 20 minutes. What's wrong? Should I call an ambulance?" "No authorities. Just keep Ethan in your apartment until I get there." I ran the last 10 blocks, ignoring the stares from pedestrians. The news hadn't broken yet, but it would soon. The city had hours, maybe less, before the infection spread beyond containment. Mrs. Chen met me in the hallway outside her apartment, Ethan half asleep against her shoulder. The boy brightened when he saw me. "Uncle Mike." I hugged him tightly, checking him for any signs of infection. He seemed fine. Normal temperature, clear eyes. "Where's my mum?" he asked. Mrs. Chen gave me a worried look. "She wasn't answering her door when I knocked earlier. I took Ethan from her. I need to check on her. Can you pack him a bag? Clothes? His medication? Anything important?" "You're scaring me, Mike." "What's happening?" "There's an outbreak. It's bad. We need to get out of the city." I used my key to enter Sarah's apartment. The lights were off, but I could hear labored breathing from the bedroom. I set Ethan down by the door. "Stay right here, buddy. Don't move until I come back." The scene in the bedroom confirmed my worst fears. Sarah lay on sweat-soaked sheets, her breathing ragged. The bedside lamp revealed mottled skin, darkened veins, blood trickling from her nose. She was in the late stages, much further along than Ray had been. "Mike?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is Ethan okay?" "He's fine," I assured her, keeping my distance. "He's with me now." She nodded weakly. I saw the news alert before my phone died. The port, quarantine. Is it what I think it is? I couldn't lie to her. "Yes." Sarah closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her temple. "I was exposed at work." Medical courier. Package from the CDC. Containment breach. Her breathing grew more labored. "Promise me. Take care of Ethan. Get him somewhere safe." "I promise." "And Mike? Don't let me turn. Ethan can't see me like that." I approached her bed, the weight of another impossible task settling on my shoulders. I stroked her hair one last time, then placed a pillow over her face. She didn't struggle. When it was done, I covered her body with a sheet and locked the bedroom door. Ethan was where I'd left him, eyes wide with fear. "Is Mum coming with us?" I knelt before him, struggling to find the words. "Mum is very sick, buddy. She can't come with us right now, but she wants you to be brave and stay with me, okay?" He nodded solemnly. Will she get better? The lie tasted bitter. The doctors are going to help her. Right now, we need to go somewhere safe. Mrs. Chen had packed a small backpack with Ethan's essentials. I thanked her and urged her to leave the city, to tell no one where she was going. Whether she would heed my warning, I didn't know. As we left the apartment building, I noticed more emergency vehicles racing past, sirens blaring. A military helicopter thumped overhead. The containment had already failed. I had a friend, Marcus, who lived in a small cabin near Mount Rainier, remote, defensible, stocked with supplies for his regular hunting trips. That was our best chance. My truck was parked in Sarah's building's garage. I strapped Ethan into the back seat and threw his bag onto the passenger seat. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Civil emergency bulletin. Stay indoors. Avoid contact with individuals showing. Signs of illness. Further instructions to follow. The streets were becoming chaotic as the news spread. People were panic buying at convenience stores, filling gas tanks, arguing with police. I took side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where blockades were already being established. A man stumbled into the street before us, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. I swerved around him, glimpsing his bloodied mouth and vacant eyes in the headlights. Ethan didn't see him, thankfully. "Uncle Mike, I'm scared," he said from the back seat. "It's okay, buddy. We're going to Marcus's cabin. Remember when we went fishing there last summer? It'll be like camping." The interstate was congested with people fleeing the city. Military checkpoints had been established at key exits, but they were overwhelmed by the volume of traffic. We waited in line for over an hour to reach the checkpoint. A soldier in partial hazmat gear approached our window. "Any symptoms?" "Fever, coughing, disorientation." "None," I replied, "just trying to get my nephew to safety." He shone a light briefly at Ethan, then at me. "Where are you headed?" "My friend's place near Enumclaw." He seemed satisfied. "Stay on the main roads. Towns are setting up their own barricades. Don't stop anywhere populated." As we passed through the checkpoint, I noticed the holding area they'd established for suspected cases. Dozens of people behind temporary fencing, many clearly infected, some already turning on others. The soldiers were getting overwhelmed, their containment failing before my eyes. We had barely cleared the checkpoint when gunfire erupted behind us. In the rearview mirror, I saw the infected breaching the barrier, swarming over the soldiers. The checkpoint collapsed in minutes. "Cover your ears, Ethan," I instructed as more shots rang out. I accelerated away from the chaos, praying the gas stations along our route would still be operational. We had half a tank, not enough to reach the cabin. The radio provided fragments of information as we drove. The outbreak had started at multiple points simultaneously: ports in Seattle, San Francisco, New York, Miami. Biological agent, possibly weaponized, origin unknown. Martial law declared in affected areas, safe zones being established. 2 hours into our journey, we reached a small town that still had power. The gas station was abandoned, but the pumps were working. I filled the tank while scanning our surroundings for any movement. Ethan had fallen asleep in the back seat, emotional exhaustion claiming him. As I replaced the fuel nozzle, headlights swept across the station. A pickup truck pulled in, 3 men inside. They looked desperate, aggressive. "That's far enough," I said as one approached. He raised his hand slightly. "We don't want trouble, just need fuel." "Help yourself," I replied, moving back toward my truck. "Nice setup you got," he said, eyeing my vehicle and the supplies visible inside. "Traveling light, though. Where's the rest of your stuff?" "This is it," I said, my hand moving to the crowbar I'd kept from the port. The man nodded to his companions, who exited the truck. "See, we've been thinking. Cities are death traps now, need to group up for safety, pool resources." "Not interested." "Wasn't really asking, friend." His hand moved to his waistband, revealing a pistol grip. I lunged forward with the crowbar, catching him across the temple before he could draw. He went down hard. The other two rushed me, but panic and adrenaline made me faster. I swung wildly, connecting with one's knee, then the other's ribs. As they fell back, I scrambled into my truck and peeled out, heart hammering in my chest. Ethan had woken during the commotion, his eyes wide with fear. "Are those bad men, Uncle Mike?" "Yes, buddy. But they can't hurt us now." The encounter was a harsh reminder. The zombies weren't the only danger. Humanity would turn on itself as society crumbled. I needed to be prepared to protect Ethan from human threats as well. We reached Marcus's cabin just before dawn. No lights were on, no vehicle in the drive. I wasn't surprised. Marcus had likely bugged out to one of his hunting blinds deeper in the wilderness. He'd told me where he kept the spare key, inside a fake rock by the back porch. The cabin was cold and dark, but secure. I brought Ethan inside and settled him on the couch with a blanket while I checked the perimeter. No signs of intruders or infected. Marcus had left his pantry well stocked, canned goods, dried meat, bottled water. His hunting rifles were gone, but I found a shotgun and some shells in the bedroom closet. For the first time since the port, I allowed myself to breathe. We were safe for now. I turned on Marcus's battery-powered radio, scanning for emergency broadcasts. Containment has failed in major coastal cities. All civilians are instructed to remain in place or proceed to designated safe zones. The following areas have been confirmed compromised and are under quarantine: Greater Seattle, Portland Metropolitan Area, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles County. The list went on. Half the country was already affected, and it had only been 24 hours. I looked at Ethan, sleeping peacefully now on the couch, unaware that his world had ended. My world, too. I had kept my promise to Sarah. I had gotten him to safety. But for how long? Days passed. The broadcasts became less frequent, the information more dire. The infection had spread globally. Governments were falling. Military forces were being overrun or abandoning their posts. The safe zones had failed one by one. We settled into a routine at the cabin. I taught Ethan how to be quiet, how to hide if strangers came. We rationed our food carefully, supplemented by fishing in the nearby stream. I never went far, always keeping the cabin in sight. Each night, I reinforced our barriers, boards over windows, furniture against doors. 2 weeks after our arrival, we had our first encounter with the infected. A lone hiker, clothes torn, face ravaged by decomposition and trauma. I spotted him approaching through the trees while Ethan and I were checking our fishing lines. "Inside now," I whispered to Ethan, who obeyed instantly. I circled behind the approaching figure, shotgun ready. One shot to the head, just like we'd seen in countless movies that had suddenly become instruction manuals for survival. The body fell, and I dragged it far from the cabin, burying it under rocks to mask the scent. That night, Ethan had nightmares. I held him as he cried for his mother, for his former life. I had no comfort to offer except my presence, my promise to protect him. In the morning, I made a decision. We couldn't stay at the cabin indefinitely. Our supplies would run out eventually, and winter would make survival nearly impossible. We needed to find other survivors, a more sustainable safe zone. The radio mentioned a military stronghold at Joint Base Lewis McChord, about 60 miles away. If anywhere was still holding out against the infected, it would be there. We packed the truck with everything useful from the cabin. I left a note for Marcus, though I doubted he was still alive to read it. The roads were largely empty now, abandoned vehicles pushed to the shoulders. We avoided the interstate, sticking to back roads, moving slowly and cautiously. The first town we passed through was a graveyard of looted storefronts and burned homes, no signs of life, infected or otherwise. The second town was worse, bodies in the streets, evidence of a last stand that had failed. We didn't stop. As we approached the outskirts of Tacoma, we encountered our first roadblock, not military, but civilian. Makeshift barricades manned by desperate-looking people with a hodgepodge of weapons. A man with a hunting rifle approached my window cautiously. "Where you coming from?" "Mountains," I replied, "headed for the base." He laughed bitterly. "Base is gone. Overrun last week. They bombed it themselves rather than let it fall." My heart sank. "Any safe places left?" "We're holding out here. Got about 50 people. Decent walls. You're welcome to join, but everyone works. Everyone contributes." I studied their setup. The barricades were solid, but their perimeter was too large for 50 people to defend effectively. Their guards looked exhausted, malnourished. "What do you need most?" I asked. "Medicine?" "Antibiotics, especially. Got people dying from infected wounds, pneumonia." I thought of Sarah's apartment, her job as a medical courier. "I might know where to find some. If I bring supplies, my nephew and I get shelter." The man nodded. "Bring medicine. You'll be heroes." We were directed to a temporary shelter, a former dental office with intact windows and sturdy doors. Ethan would stay there, watched over by an elderly couple, while I made the dangerous journey back to Seattle. "I'll be back tomorrow," I promised Ethan as I prepared to leave. "Remember what I taught you. Stay quiet. Stay hidden." He nodded solemnly, clutching his backpack. "I'll be brave." The drive back to the city was tense but uneventful. The infected seemed to have migrated toward population centers, leaving the highways relatively clear. As I approached Seattle, the devastation became more apparent. Fires still burned in parts of the downtown area. The Space Needle stood as a silent sentinel over the ruined city. Sarah's apartment building was mercifully quiet. I parked a block away and approached on foot, shotgun ready. The lobby showed signs of violence, bloodstains, broken furniture, a body in the corner too decomposed to identify. The elevators weren't working, so I took the stairs, moving quietly, pausing to listen at each landing. Sarah's floor was silent. I unlocked her apartment and stepped inside, the familiar scent of her perfume still lingering beneath the mustier odor of abandonment. I avoided looking at her bedroom door as I moved to the kitchen. Sarah had kept a list of medical suppliers and delivery locations on her refrigerator for work. I scanned it quickly, finding what I needed: a pharmaceutical storage facility in South Lake Union, less than 3 miles away. Before leaving, I gathered more of Ethan's belongings, photos of his mother, his favorite books, the stuffed dinosaur he'd reluctantly left behind in our hasty departure. These weren't necessities for survival, but they were essential for his heart. The pharmaceutical facility was surrounded by infected, dozens of them shuffled aimlessly in the parking lot and around the loading docks. Getting inside would be nearly impossible without drawing them all to me. I circled the building, looking for another approach. A fire escape on the north side seemed promising, leading to a second-floor window. I found an abandoned delivery truck a few blocks away and drove it near the building, positioning it under the fire escape. The noise attracted some of the infected, but not enough to overwhelm me. Standing on the truck's roof, I could just reach the bottom rung of the fire escape ladder. I pulled myself up and climbed quietly to the second floor. The window was locked, but a forceful strike with the shotgun butt shattered it. I slipped inside, finding myself in an employee break room. The facility had been looted, but not systematically. The most obvious medications, painkillers, stimulants were gone, but the antibiotics and many specialty drugs remained in the storage area. I filled a duffel bag with broad-spectrum antibiotics, wound care supplies, and as many other useful medications as I could identify. As I prepared to leave, I heard voices, human voices, coming from the lower level. I crouched near the stairwell, listening. "Check the second floor. I want a complete inventory before sunset." What about the geeks outside? They'll be drawn away when the diversion starts. Just be ready to move quickly. I retreated to the break room, searching for another exit. There was a door leading to a hallway, which connected to another stairwell on the opposite side of the building. I moved quickly but quietly, the duffel bag heavy with life-saving supplies. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard footsteps coming up. I pressed myself against the wall, shotgun ready. A man appeared, dressed in paramilitary gear, tactical vest, combat boots, sidearm holstered on his thigh. He spotted me immediately, his hand moving to his weapon. "Hold it," I said, shotgun leveled at his chest. "I'm just here for medicine." "I'm leaving." "Lower your weapon," he replied calmly. "You've walked into a military operation." "Military? What's left of it, you mean?" A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Something like that. I'm Captain Harris, former Army Rangers. Now I'm with the Northwest Recovery Initiative." "Never heard of it." "Because we're what's left, as you so eloquently put it. We're gathering supplies for a secure compound east of the mountains. Food, medicine, weapons." I kept the shotgun steady. "Good for you. I've got people counting on these antibiotics." Harris studied me. "How many people?" "About 50. Small community outside Tacoma." He nodded thoughtfully. "We could use someone with your initiative. Your people too, if they're healthy and willing to work." "Work for what?" "Rebuilding. We've secured a former missile silo facility in eastern Washington. Self-sufficient power, water purification, hydroponic gardens. We're establishing a long-term survival colony." It sounded too good to be true. "And you're just recruiting random looters you meet?" Harris smiled. "I'm recruiting capable survivors who demonstrate resourcefulness and courage. The silo has capacity for 500. We're at just over 100 now. A missile silo. Defensible, isolated, sustainable. It was a better option than the exposed roadblock community, if Harris was telling the truth. I need to get these supplies back to my people first, and my nephew is waiting for me. Of course. We'll be at this facility for the next 48 hours. Return if you're interested. Bring your people if they want to join us." I backed away, keeping the shotgun trained on him until I reached the exit. His offer played on my mind as I made my way back to the truck. A secure facility would provide Ethan with safety, maybe even some semblance of normalcy. But trusting strangers had become a luxury few could afford. The drive back to the Tacoma settlement was tense. Night was falling, and the infected were more active after dark. I had to navigate around several large hordes that had congregated on the main roads. It was well past midnight when I finally approached the roadblock. Something was wrong. The barricades had been breached in several places. No guards challenged my approach. I stopped the truck at a safe distance, listening. The moans of the infected carried on the night air, along with something else. Gunfire, sporadic but ongoing. I couldn't leave Ethan, but rushing in blindly would likely get me killed. I approached on foot, staying low, using abandoned vehicles for cover. The settlement was under attack, but not by zombies. Armed men moved methodically through the streets, executing survivors. This wasn't mindless violence. It was a coordinated assault. I worked my way toward the dental office where I'd left Ethan. The building appeared intact, no signs of breach. I circled around to the back entrance, finding it locked. I knocked softly, calling Ethan's name. No response. Fear clutched at my throat as I forced the door open. Inside, I found the elderly couple dead, gunshot wounds to the head, execution style. No sign of Ethan. I searched frantically, calling his name in a hoarse whisper. In the main office, I found a body beneath a desk, a young man I didn't recognize, still clutching a pistol. "They took the kids," he gasped when I approached. A gunshot wound in his abdomen was slowly killing him. "Men in black trucks," said they were taking them somewhere safe. "How many men?" "Which direction?" "Dozen, maybe more. Military gear. Headed east on the highway." He coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "They killed anyone who resisted. East, toward the mountains, toward the missile silo Harris had mentioned." "Who are you?" the dying man asked. "The uncle of one of those kids. I'm going to get them back." He nodded weakly. "Gun's got 2 rounds left." He pressed the pistol into my hand before his eyes glazed over. I took the weapon and moved cautiously back to my truck. The settlement was lost. The remaining defenders were being overwhelmed by both human attackers and the infected drawn by the noise. I couldn't help them now. My only priority was finding Ethan. I drove east, pushing the truck as fast as I dared on the dark highways. Harris had said they'd be at the pharmaceutical facility for 48 hours, but that had clearly been a lie to keep me from interfering with their raid. They were heading to their silo base, and they had Ethan. Dawn was breaking as I approached the Cascade Mountains. I had been driving for hours, following tracks where I could, guessing where I couldn't. The terrain was becoming more difficult, winding mountain roads, some partially blocked by abandoned vehicles or small rock slides. I stopped at a scenic overlook to scan the valleys below with a pair of binoculars I'd found in Marcus's cabin. A convoy of 3 black SUVs and a transport truck was moving along a service road about 2 miles ahead. Military precision, just like the attackers at the settlement. I memorized their route and took a parallel logging road, pushing the truck to its limits on the rough terrain. If I could get ahead of them, I might be able to set up an ambush. 1 man against a dozen trained fighters weren't good odds, but surprise would help even them. The logging road rejoined the main route at a narrow bridge spanning a deep ravine. I positioned the truck to block the road and waited, shotgun-loaded, pistol ready as backup. When the convoy appeared, I would demand Ethan's return. If they refused, I would open fire, aiming for the drivers first to disable the vehicles. The convoy appeared right on schedule, moving cautiously toward the blocked bridge. The lead SUV stopped about 50 yards away. Armed men emerged, scanning the area. I shouted from my position behind the truck, "I want the boy you took, Ethan Delaney. Send him out alone." A tense silence followed. Then a familiar voice called back, "The children are safe. We're taking them to a secure facility." Harris. So he'd led the raid personally. "Send Ethan out now, or nobody crosses this bridge alive," I yelled back. After a brief consultation, Harris replied, "We're opening the transport. See for yourself." The back of the transport truck opened, revealing about a dozen children huddled inside. I spotted Ethan immediately, his red jacket visible among the group. He looked frightened, but unharmed. "Ethan, are you okay?" I called. He nodded, clearly terrified. "These children were in danger," Harris shouted. "The settlement was compromised, infected inside the walls. We evacuated those we could save. By killing their families, we eliminated the infected and those who had been bitten. Standard protocol. Let Ethan go and you can pass." Harris laughed. "You're in no position to negotiate. We have superior numbers, superior firepower, and a better chance of keeping these children alive than a lone man on the run." He was right, and we both knew it, but I couldn't let them take Ethan. "Then let me come with him," I countered. "You offered me a place yesterday. Said you needed capable people." A long pause followed as Harris considered this. Finally, he nodded. "Weapons on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Approach slowly." I placed the shotgun and pistol on the road and walked forward with my hands raised. 2 armed men met me halfway, searching me roughly for concealed weapons. Finding none, they escorted me to Harris. "You understand that if you cause any trouble, you'll be dealt with permanently," Harris said. I nodded. "I just want to protect my nephew." "Then we have the same goal." He gestured to the transport. "Join the children. We'll be at the facility before nightfall." The journey to the missile silo was tense and uncomfortable. Ethan clung to me, whispering about the raid, how men had come in the night, separating children from adults, how he had heard gunshots as they were loaded into the truck. The other children shared similar stories, their eyes haunted by what they'd witnessed. We descended into a valley I didn't recognize, then up a service road to what appeared to be an abandoned industrial facility surrounded by a high fence. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter. The convoy passed through heavily fortified gates into an underground loading area. As the children were led away for processing, Harris took me aside. "You'll undergo medical screening, then orientation. If you're cleared, you'll be assigned quarters and duties." "I stay with Ethan," I insisted. "Family units are preserved when possible," he replied, "but everyone serves the community according to their skills." The medical screening was thorough. Blood tests, physical examination, detailed questions about my history, and any potential exposure to the infected. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, seemed genuinely concerned with health rather than control. She cleared me and directed me to orientation. The orientation was essentially an indoctrination. The Northwest Recovery Initiative was presented as humanity's best hope for survival. The silo facility was one of several established by forward-thinking military and government officials who had anticipated the collapse. They had stockpiled supplies, recruited specialists, and established protocols for rebuilding society. At first glance, it seemed impressive. The silo had been converted into a multi-level habitat with living quarters, communal areas, hydroponic gardens, a small medical facility and workshops. Solar panels and wind turbines provided electricity. Water was drawn from a deep aquifer and purified on-site. But something felt wrong. The guards were too numerous, too heavily armed for a civilian shelter. The residents avoided eye contact, speaking in hushed tones. And there was Harris, moving through it all with the confidence of absolute authority. I was reunited with Ethan that evening. He had been assigned to a children's dormitory, but I was permitted to visit during designated hours. He seemed calmer now, even excited about the other children he'd met, and the teacher who had shown him the hydroponic gardens. "They have school here, Uncle Mike," he told me, "and real food, not just cans." I forced a smile. "That's great, buddy." My own assignment came the next morning. Security detail, patrolling the outer perimeter with 3 other men. It was a test, I realized. Harris was evaluating my loyalty, my willingness to enforce their rules. My patrol partners were former military, Peters, Rodriguez, and Taylor. They were committed believers in the initiative's mission, or at least they presented themselves that way. "You're lucky, being recruited directly by the captain," Rodriguez told me as we walked the fence line. "Most people have to prove themselves for weeks before getting security clearance." "What exactly are we securing?" I asked. "I haven't seen any infected near the facility." Peters laughed. "Infected aren't the main threat anymore. It's other survivors, the ones who want what we have without following the rules." "What happens to them?" Taylor answered. "Depends. Some join up, some don't." The implication was clear. Those who refused were eliminated. Over the next few days, I learned more about the initiative's operations. They conducted regular raids on surrounding communities, ostensibly to rescue valuable individuals, children, people with medical or scientific knowledge, those with useful skills. In reality, they were building a workforce, a population that could be controlled and directed. Harris was creating his own fiefdom, positioning himself as the savior of civilization while establishing a dictatorship. Those who questioned his methods disappeared, usually during outside missions. The silo wasn't a refuge. It was a prison camp with better amenities. I needed to get Ethan out, but escape wouldn't be easy. The facility was locked down tight, all movements monitored, all exits guarded. My security role gave me some freedom of movement, but not enough to smuggle a child out unnoticed. I bided my time, building trust, volunteering for additional duties that would give me access to different areas of the facility. I memorized patrol schedules, identified the guards who might be sympathetic, located potential weaknesses in the security systems. 2 weeks after our arrival, I discovered something disturbing. While delivering supplies to the medical unit, I overheard Harris speaking with the head doctor. The latest trial showed promising results, the doctor was saying. Subject 12 maintained cognitive functions for nearly 30 minutes after infection before succumbing. The modified strain is definitely showing increased latency. But still 100% mortality? Harris asked. Yes, we haven't achieved immunity, just delayed onset. They were experimenting with the virus, the same one that had turned the world into a nightmare of walking dead, not trying to cure it, but to control it, to weaponize it further. I retreated before they spotted me, my mind racing. This changed everything. Harris wasn't just building a post-apocalyptic dictatorship, he was actively working to ensure the apocalypse continued, perhaps had even been involved in its beginning. That night, I made contact with a small group of residents who shared my suspicions. Anna, a former CDC researcher who had been rescued from a university facility. Marcus, not my friend from the cabin, but a retired Marine who had joined voluntarily before realizing the truth. Diane, a computer specialist who had managed to hack into some of the facility's systems. "We've been planning an escape for months," Anna whispered during our clandestine meeting in the maintenance tunnels, "but we needed someone with security access." "How many are going?" I asked. 15, including children, Marcus replied. "Any more would be impossible to move undetected." I thought of Ethan and the other children I'd seen in the dormitory. "We need to take all the children." Diane shook her head. "Impossible. The security around the children's wing is too tight. We can maybe get 5 out, no more. Then we don't just escape," I said, an idea forming. "We expose Harris for what he is, turn his people against him." Anna looked skeptical. "These people are either true believers or too scared to act." "Fear can work both ways," I argued. "Right now, they fear Harris more than the alternatives. We need to change that equation." Over the next week, we refined our plan. Diane would hack into the communication system to broadcast evidence of Harris's experiments throughout the facility. Marcus would secure an escape route through the maintenance tunnels. Anna would gather what evidence she could from the medical unit, and I would get the children ready to move when the chaos erupted. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Harris announced a major raid on a settlement that had been discovered about 50 miles west. Nearly half of the security forces would be deployed, leaving the facility more vulnerable than usual. As the raid team departed, we put our plan into motion. Diane infiltrated the communications center, installing a bypass that would allow her to override the system. Anna copied research files documenting the virus experiments, including video of human subjects being deliberately infected. I used my security clearance to access the children's wing, explaining to the teacher that I had orders to conduct a fire drill. At precisely 2200 hours, the facility's speakers crackled to life. The normal announcements were replaced by Dr. Werner, the head physician, detailing the latest experiment. Video screens throughout the compound showed footage of restrained subjects being injected with the modified virus, their slow, agonizing transformation into the very monsters everyone feared. Harris's voice could be heard clearly, approving the procedures, discussing how the weaponized strain could be used to cleanse competing settlements and create a controlled repopulation scenario. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Panic spread through the facility. Some residents barricaded themselves in their quarters. Others rushed to the command center, demanding explanations. The remaining security forces were overwhelmed, unsure whether to contain the residents or defend against an external breach. In the confusion, I led the children through a service corridor to the maintenance tunnels where Marcus waited. 23 children in all, moving quietly in a practiced line, just as we had rehearsed during our fire drills. Ethan helped with the youngest ones, showing unexpected maturity in the crisis. We met Anna and Diane at the tunnel junction. We have 15 minutes before the backup generators cycle and the security systems reset, Diane explained, breathless from running. After that, all exits will seal automatically. The maintenance tunnel led to an emergency exit designed for rapid evacuation of essential personnel. Marcus disabled the alarm and unlocked the heavy door. Beyond lay a steep path up to the perimeter fence, where a section had been quietly weakened over the preceding days. We were halfway to the fence when the facility plunged into darkness. The primary power had been cut. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the compound. "They're implementing lockdown protocols," Diane said. "Faster than I anticipated." Marcus took point, leading us to the weakened section of fence. One by one, the children were helped through the gap, with the adults forming a protective cordon around them. We were loading the last child through when the alarm sounded, a wailing siren that shattered the night. Spotlights mounted on the perimeter towers swept across the grounds, and I heard the pounding of boots as security teams responded to the breach. "Go!" Marcus shouted, pushing Anna and Diane toward the fence. "Get the children to the vehicles!" We had stashed 3 vehicles in the forest a half-mile away, a precaution taken during previous patrol duties. If we could reach them before the pursuit organized, we had a chance. Marcus and I took rear guard, covering the retreat with stolen assault rifles. The first security team that emerged from the facility hesitated when they saw our weapons. These weren't hardened killers like Harris, just people who had accepted his protection. "Harris has been experimenting with the virus," I shouted to them. "He's creating new strains. You've seen the evidence." Doubt flickered across their faces. Some lowered their weapons slightly. Then Harris's voice boomed from the facility's external speakers. "The security breach is being perpetrated by infected individuals. Shoot on sight. I repeat, full containment protocols are in effect." The guards raised their weapons again, their training overriding their doubts. Marcus and I ducked behind concrete barriers as the first shots were fired. "We can't hold them long," Marcus grunted, returning fire in controlled bursts. "Go with the children." "I'll buy you time." "I'm not leaving you here," I replied, even as I recognized the necessity of his sacrifice. He gave me a grim smile. "One of us has to make sure those kids get somewhere safe. You have Ethan. You have a reason." Before I could argue further, he broke from cover and charged toward the approaching guards, firing steadily, drawing their attention away from the fence and the retreating group. I used the diversion to slip through the fence and sprint after the others. The sounds of gunfire faded behind me, then stopped abruptly. I didn't look back. I caught up with Anna, Diane, and the children at the vehicles, 3 SUVs hidden under camouflage netting. We loaded the children quickly, dividing them between the vehicles. Ethan stayed with me, his small hand gripping mine tightly. "Where's Marcus?" Anna asked as we prepared to depart. I shook my head. She understood immediately. "We need to split up," Diane said. 3 vehicles heading in different directions will be harder to track." She was right. We quickly divided supplies and agreed on a rendezvous point, an abandoned ranger station in the national forest, 30 miles northeast. If any vehicle didn't arrive within 24 hours, the others would assume the worst and move on. I took 7 children, including Ethan, in my vehicle. Anna and Diane each took 8. With final nods of determination, we drove off in different directions into the dark forest. I followed logging roads, avoiding the main highways where Harris's returning raid team might spot us. The children were quiet, understanding the need for silence, their young lives already conditioned to crisis and flight. We were 10 miles from the facility when I heard the helicopters, at least 2, their searchlights sweeping the forest canopy. Harris had called in air support, likely from another initiative facility. Our head start was rapidly evaporating. I killed the lights and pulled the SUV beneath a dense cluster of trees. "Everyone out," I whispered to the children. "We need to hide until the helicopters pass." We huddled in the underbrush as the aircraft passed overhead. The searchlights came dangerously close, illuminating patches of forest just yards from our position. The youngest child, a 4-year-old girl named Lily, began to whimper in fear. Ethan put his arm around her, murmuring comforting words. When the immediate danger had passed, we returned to the vehicle and continued our journey, staying under tree cover wherever possible. The ranger station was still hours away, and I wasn't confident we would make it before daybreak made us easier to spot. As dawn approached, I made a difficult decision. We would abandon the vehicle and continue on foot. The forest provided better cover, and Harris would be looking for vehicles, not pedestrians. "It's like a hiking trip," I told the children as we gathered essential supplies into backpacks. "We're going to walk very quietly through the trees, like a game." They accepted this explanation readily, their trust in me both heartwarming and terrifying in its completeness. I had become responsible for these young lives in a world determined to extinguish them. We walked for hours, following game trails, keeping to the densest parts of the forest. The children were remarkable in their resilience, even the youngest maintaining the pace with minimal complaint. We stopped only for brief rests and to share water and energy bars from our limited supplies. By midday, exhaustion was setting in. We found a small clearing surrounded by thick undergrowth, defensible, with good visibility in all directions. I established a perimeter using simple early warning systems of balanced stones and tripwires attached to tin cans. Not sophisticated, but enough to alert us to approach. The children slept in shifts with the older ones helping to keep watch. Ethan stayed by my side, his eyes constantly scanning the forest, his expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. "Will the bad men find us?" he asked quietly. "We've been very careful," I replied, "and we'll keep moving until we reach the ranger station. Anna and Diane will be waiting with the other children." He nodded, accepting my assurance with the simple faith of childhood. What happens after that? It was the question I'd been avoiding. What came after? The world had collapsed. The infection had spread globally. Safe zones had fallen. What future could I promise these children? "We'll find somewhere safe," I said, the words hollow even to my ears. "Somewhere we can build a new home." Evening approached, bringing with it cooler temperatures and the need to move on. We had covered perhaps 5 miles since abandoning the vehicle. Painfully slow progress, but necessary given the children's stamina and the need for stealth. As we prepared to depart, I heard a sound that froze my blood, the distant but unmistakable moans of the infected. They were still miles away, but moving in our direction, a herd drawn perhaps by the helicopter activity earlier. "Change of plans," I told the children. "We need to move faster now and in a different direction." We headed due east, away from both the approaching herd and our original path to the ranger station. The terrain became more difficult, steeper, with loose rocks that threatened ankles with every step. The younger children required carrying at times, slowing our progress further. Night fell, making the journey even more treacherous. We had to stop frequently, risking detection to ensure we didn't lose anyone in the darkness. The sounds of the infected grew gradually louder behind us, not immediate danger, but a constant reminder of the threat pursuing us. Around midnight, we stumbled upon an unexpected sanctuary, a fire lookout tower perched atop a rocky outcrop. The structure was abandoned, but intact, offering both shelter and a defensible position with excellent visibility. We climbed the steep stairs, the children practically crawling with exhaustion by the time we reached the top. The lookout cabin was small, but sufficient. A single room with basic furnishings, a wood stove, and most importantly, sturdy doors and windows that could be barricaded. From this elevation, I could see for miles in the moonlight. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and deadly in its vastness. To the west, perhaps 3 miles distant, I could make out movement among the trees, the herd of infected, still following our general direction but not directly tracking us. More concerning were the lights to the south, vehicles moving along a Forest Service road, their pattern suggesting a methodical search. Harris's men, undoubtedly. We were caught between 2 lethal threats with limited supplies and exhausted children. The ranger station rendezvous was now impossible to reach safely. I had to assume Anna and Diane had encountered similar obstacles and made their own adaptations to the plan. I established watches through the night, allowing most of the children to sleep. The tower had a basic hand-crank radio, which I attempted to use to contact potential allies. Most frequencies produced only static, but on one emergency channel, I detected fragmentary transmissions, something about a safe zone and evacuation protocols. Not enough to act on, but evidence that organized human resistance continued somewhere. Morning brought new challenges. The herd had changed direction during the night, now moving on a course that would take them directly past the base of our tower. Dozens of them, in various states of decay, shambling through the forest with the mindless determination of their kind. From our elevated position, we were safe from their immediate threat, but effectively trapped. The children watched in horrified fascination as the first of the infected emerged from the tree line below us. "Why do they want to eat us?" asked Lily, the youngest. "They don't really want to," I explained gently. "They're very sick. The sickness makes them forget who they are." "Like my mom," Ethan said quietly. "She got sick too." I put my arm around his shoulders. "Yes, buddy, like your mom." We remained in absolute silence as the herd passed beneath us. Hours crawled by as the seemingly endless procession of walking dead flowed around our tower like a grotesque river. By mid-afternoon, the last stragglers had disappeared into the forest to the east, leaving us in tenuous safety once more. Our supplies were dwindling rapidly. I had to find food and water soon, or risk having the children become too weak to travel. The lookout had a map of the surrounding area, showing a small lake about 2 miles northwest. If we could reach it, we would have water at least, and possibly fish or game nearby. We descended the tower cautiously as evening approached again. The children were rested but hungry, their faces pinched with the beginning of real deprivation. I organized them into a tight formation, with the oldest at the perimeter and the youngest protected in the center. Our progress toward the lake was painfully slow. Every suspicious sound required investigation before we could proceed. Twice we had to hide as small groups of infected passed nearby, drawn perhaps by the lingering scent of the main herd. We reached the lake just before nightfall. The water was clear and cold, a blessing after our rationed supplies. I set the older children to filling our containers while I rigged rudimentary fishing lines from supplies in our emergency kits. That night, we ate our first real meal in days. Small fish cooked over a carefully concealed fire. The children's spirits lifted noticeably, their natural resilience asserting itself despite the dire circumstances. I used the improved morale to discuss our situation honestly with the older children. Our original plan had failed. We had no way of knowing if Anna and Diane had reached safety with the others. We needed a new objective. The radio in the tower picked up transmissions about a safe zone, I explained. If it exists, it could be our best hope. "Where is it?" asked Martin, the oldest boy at 12. I couldn't tell exactly. The transmission was breaking up, but it seemed to be east of here, maybe toward the coast. "That's hundreds of miles," said Sophia, a serious 10-year-old who had appointed herself Ethan's protector. "Yes," I admitted, "it won't be easy. But staying here isn't an option. Our supplies won't last, and winter is coming." The children accepted this with the same stoic determination they had shown throughout our ordeal. Their capacity to adapt to this nightmare world both inspired and saddened me. No child should have to become this resilient, this pragmatic about survival. We spent 2 days at the lake, recovering our strength and preparing for the journey ahead. I fashioned better weapons from branches and stones, taught the older children basic self-defense against both infected and human threats, and established clear protocols for different emergency scenarios. On the 3rd morning, we set out eastward, following the rising sun. Our pace was better now, the children's endurance improved by rest and proper nourishment. We covered nearly 10 miles that day, encountering only isolated infected that we could easily avoid. The pattern continued for nearly a week. We moved by day, found secure shelter by night, scavenged what food we could, and slowly made our way eastward. The children developed a remarkable cohesion, supporting each other, sharing burdens, maintaining discipline without constant reminders. Ethan particularly flourished in this environment. The traumatized, frightened boy was emerging as a natural leader among the younger children, showing empathy and practical intelligence beyond his years. Watching him, I felt a bittersweet pride, proud of his growth, sad for the circumstances forcing it. On the 8th day of our journey, we encountered our first sign of organized human presence. We were following a small stream when we came upon a tripwire connected to a simple alarm system of cans and bottles. Someone had established a perimeter. I halted the children immediately and scouted ahead alone. About a quarter-mile downstream, I discovered a small encampment, 3 cabins arranged around a central fire pit with a rudimentary wall of sharpened stakes surrounding the perimeter. People moved about inside, ordinary tasks being performed with extraordinary vigilance. I watched for nearly an hour, assessing whether these people represented sanctuary or threat. They seemed organized, but not military, civilians who had adapted to survive. I counted 7 adults and 4 children, all appearing healthy and reasonably well-equipped. Finally, I made a decision. We needed allies, information, and supplies. The risk had to be taken. I returned to our hiding place and prepared the children. "I'm going to approach them openly," I explained. "You'll stay hidden until I signal that it's safe." "What if it's not safe?" Sophia asked. "Then you run. Remember our emergency plan. Head back to the lake tower and wait 3 days. If I don't come, keep moving east." Ethan hugged me tightly. "Be careful, Uncle Mike." I approached the encampment with empty hands raised, calling out before I reached the perimeter. "Hello, the camp. I'm alone and unarmed." 2 men with rifles appeared at the wall, weapons trained on me. "That's far enough," one called. "State your business." "I'm a survivor like you," I replied. "Looking for information, maybe trade if you're willing." "Information about what?" I heard transmissions about a safe zone to the east, trying to find it." The men exchanged glances. One disappeared briefly, returning with an older woman who studied me carefully through binoculars. "How many in your group?" she asked. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. 8, 7 children and myself. We escaped from a compound to the west. Bad situation there. "Harris's place?" she asked sharply. I nodded, surprised. "You know about it?" "Everyone with sense avoids that territory." She conferred briefly with the men, then called out again. "You can approach." Slowly. The children too, if they're nearby. I gave the signal, and the children emerged cautiously from the trees. The sight of them, thin, tired but unbroken, seemed to settle something for the camp's leaders. The gate in the wall opened, and we were allowed inside. The encampment was called River Bend, a community of survivors who had fled Seattle in the early days of the outbreak. They had established a sustainable existence, fishing the stream, cultivating small gardens, conducting cautious trade with other survivor groups. Their leader, Eleanor, had been a park ranger before the world ended. Her knowledge of the wilderness had kept them alive when so many others had perished. Over a meal better than anything we'd had in weeks, she shared what they knew of the region's situation. Harris's group is one of several military-style compounds that formed after the collapse, she explained. They call themselves saviors, but they're really just warlords carving out territory. What about the safe zone transmissions? I asked. Eleanor nodded. It's real. Coast Guard and Navy elements established a secure area on Bainbridge Island in Puget Sound. Limited access, strict quarantine protocols, but they're taking in verified survivors, especially children. How do we get there? She spread a map on the table. You're here. Bainbridge is approximately 60 miles west-northwest. Under normal circumstances, a few days' journey. Now, she traced a route that zigzagged across the terrain. This path avoids the worst hot zones and Harris's patrol routes, 2 weeks minimum, and the last part requires boats to reach the island. I studied the map, memorizing key landmarks. Do you have contact with them? Can you verify they're still operational? Intermittent radio contact only. Their last transmission was 3 days ago. Standard status report, nothing unusual. The news of an organized safe zone, one run by legitimate military rather than self-appointed warlords, rekindled hope I had almost abandoned. If we could reach Bainbridge Island, the children would have security, education, medical care, a future. Eleanor offered us shelter for a few days to rest and prepare. The children integrated quickly with the camp's existing youngsters, the universal adaptability of childhood asserting itself even in this shattered world. For the first time since our escape, they played actual play, not the survival games and practice drills that had occupied them. Watching Ethan laugh as he joined a makeshift game of soccer, I felt a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. He could still be a child, at least in moments. The world hadn't taken everything from him. Eleanor and I spent hours planning our journey to Bainbridge. The route would take us through varied terrain, forests, suburban ruins, and finally the shoreline of Puget Sound. Each environment presented different challenges and threats. The suburbs are the worst, Eleanor warned. Highest concentration of infected plus scavenger groups that prey on travelers. Move through at night, avoid main roads, and have escape routes planned for every section. She provided us with improved supplies, better weapons, more efficient food packs, proper first aid kits, even walkie-talkies with a limited range for communication if our group needed to split temporarily. On our 4th morning at River Bend, disaster struck. I was awakened before dawn by shouts and the crackle of gunfire. Harris's men had found us. Eleanor burst into our cabin. They've breached the east wall. You need to get the children out through the emergency tunnel. The camp had prepared for this contingency. A concealed tunnel led from the main cabin to an exit point 200 yards into the forest. I gathered our children and Eleanor's 4, herding them toward the tunnel entrance hidden beneath a trapdoor. "What about your people?" I asked Eleanor as she handed me a rifle. "We'll hold them as long as we can." "Get the children to Bainbridge. That's what matters now." The sounds of fighting intensified as I led the children into the dark passage. Ethan looked back, his expression torn between fear and the desire to help. "Shouldn't we fight too?" "Our job is to get everyone to safety," I told him. "That's how we help." The tunnel was narrow and damp, requiring us to move in single file, hands on the shoulders of the person ahead. 11 children now, ranging from 4 to 12 years old, all moving with the practiced quiet of survivors. We emerged into the forest as dawn broke. Through the trees, we could see smoke rising from the camp, buildings burning, the battle clearly still in progress. I resisted the urge to return and help, knowing my primary responsibility was to the children now depending on me. We moved quickly away from the camp, following the route Eleanor had mapped out for us. The additional children complicated our journey. More mouths to feed, more small bodies to protect, more potential for noise or detection. But they also brought knowledge of the area and experience in wilderness survival that proved invaluable. By mid-morning, we had put several miles between ourselves and River Bend. I called a brief halt in a dense thicket, allowing the children to rest while I assessed our situation. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but I had no doubt Harris's men would follow once they finished with the camp. We needed to move faster than our original plan had called for, which meant taking greater risks. I explained this to the children, not sugarcoating the danger, but framing it in terms they could understand and accept. "We're going to travel more during daylight than we planned," I told them. "That means we need perfect silence and complete attention at all times." "Can you do that?" They nodded solemnly, even the youngest understanding the stakes. "If we get separated," I continued, "remember the map we studied. Bainbridge Island is our destination. Follow the route we marked, avoid populated areas, and trust each other." Over the next 4 days, we pushed ourselves to the limit, covering ground at a pace I would never have believed possible with children this young. We encountered scattered infected, which we evaded rather than engaged. Game was plentiful, allowing us to supplement our supplies without risking fires that might give away our position. On the 5th day, we reached the outer suburbs of Tacoma, the first major urban area on our route to the coast. The devastation was comprehensive. Abandoned vehicles choked the streets. Buildings stood with doors and windows gaping, many bearing the ominous black X marks that indicated the presence of infection during the early containment efforts. And everywhere the infected wandered, not in organized herds as we had seen in the forest, but in unpredictable clusters that made navigation a nerve-wracking challenge. We skirted the worst areas, using railroad tracks and drainage channels as impromptu highways through the urban wasteland. The children maintained remarkable discipline, moving in perfect silence, freezing in place at my hand signals, showing awareness of threats that children their age should never have had to develop. On the second night in the suburbs, we sheltered in an abandoned fire station. The building had been fortified by previous occupants, windows boarded, doors reinforced, rooftop access secured with a heavy trapdoor. It offered the first truly safe rest we'd had since leaving River Bend. I established watches, with the oldest children taking 2-hour shifts alongside me. From the roof, we could see for blocks in all directions, giving us advance warning of any approaching threats. During the pre-dawn hours, while on watch with Martin, we spotted movement several blocks away, flashlight beams sweeping methodically through buildings. Too coordinated to be scavengers, too thorough to be casual travelers. "Harris's men," Martin whispered. "Probably," I replied. "They're persistent. I'll give them that. Why do they want us so badly?" "We're just kids." I considered how to explain the complex motivations driving Harris's obsession with recapturing us. "Control," I said finally. "People like Harris need to control everything and everyone. Our escape threatens that control, makes others question it." Martin nodded, his young face grave beyond his years. "My dad was like that. Not as bad, but he couldn't stand when things didn't go his way." We watched as the search party moved through the area, their methodical pattern bringing them gradually closer to our position. They would reach the fire station by mid-morning at their current pace. I woke the others before dawn. "We need to move out earlier than planned. Search team approaching from the southwest." We gathered our supplies and slipped away as the sky lightened, using the morning mist as additional cover. Our route took us northeast, away from the searching team and toward the shores of Commencement Bay, where we would begin the coastal portion of our journey to Bainbridge. The urban landscape thinned as we approached the water, giving way to industrial zones, warehouses, shipping facilities, fuel storage tanks. Fewer infected here, but also less cover, making us more vulnerable to detection by human threats. We reached the shoreline near midday, taking shelter in a derelict boathouse to rest and plan our next move. According to Eleanor's map, we needed to follow the coast northwest for approximately 30 miles, then find boats to cross the channel to Bainbridge Island. The coastal route presented new challenges. The shoreline alternated between developed areas with homes and businesses and more natural sections with beaches and bluffs. The open areas left us exposed, while the developed sections likely harbored both infected and potentially hostile survivors. "We'll move primarily at night along this stretch," I told the children. "The moonlight on the water will give us enough visibility, and we'll have better concealment from anyone watching the shore." That evening, as we prepared to depart, I noticed Ethan staring out across the water, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking about, buddy?" I asked, sitting beside him. "Mom liked the beach," he said quietly. "We used to collect shells." I put my arm around his shoulders. "She'd be proud of how brave you've been." He leaned against me. "Do you think the place we're going will be safe? Really safe?" "I hope so," I answered honestly. "Military protection, walls, supplies, it's our best chance." "But no place is really safe anymore, is it?" The question cut deep, a child's perception slicing through adult pretenses. "Not like before," I admitted, "but we make safety where we can. We protect each other." He seemed satisfied with that answer, returning to help the younger children prepare for our night journey. I remained by the water a moment longer, watching the sunset paint the contaminated world in deceptively beautiful colors. Ethan was right. Safety was now relative, temporary, always conditional, but the alternative was surrender, and that I could not accept. Our progress along the coast was slower than I had hoped. The terrain was challenging, rocky beaches giving way to steep bluffs, forcing us inland to find passages, then back to the shore when urban areas became too dense with infected. On the third night of coastal travel, we encountered another survivor group, 3 families who had established a small compound in what had once been a seaside resort. Unlike River Bend, they were suspicious and unwelcoming, training weapons on us from the moment we were spotted. "We don't take in strays," their leader, a hard-faced man named Wilson, informed us when I approached under a flag of truce. "Too many mouths to feed already." "We're not asking to join you," I explained, "just passing through on our way to Bainbridge." Wilson laughed harshly. "Bainbridge? You and half the survivors on the coast. Good luck getting across the channel. Navy shoots anything that approaches without clearance. This was new information and concerning. How does one get clearance?" "Radio contact in advance, screening on the mainland side before crossing, quarantine after arrival." He studied our group with skeptical eyes. "They're taking orphaned children, I hear. Might let your bunch in. You, though." He shrugged. "Adults are a different story." I negotiated passage through their territory, trading some of our medical supplies for the information and safe conduct. As we continued north, Wilson's words echoed in my mind. If adults were being turned away from Bainbridge, what would happen when we reached the crossing point? Would I be separated from Ethan and the others after everything we'd endured together? We had covered perhaps 2/3 of the coastal route when disaster struck again. We were navigating a section where a collapsed bluff had forced us up onto a road running parallel to the shore. The night was overcast, reducing visibility significantly, safer from distant observation, but more dangerous for close encounters. The infected found us before we saw them, a dozen or more emerging suddenly from a roadside diner. The children reacted with practiced precision, forming a defensive circle, the oldest on the outside with makeshift weapons ready. "Back toward the beach," I ordered quietly. "Slow and steady." We began a controlled retreat, maintaining formation. The infected followed, their moans attracting more from nearby buildings. Our circle tightened as their numbers grew. We reached a break in the guardrail where a path led down to the beach. I directed the children through, taking up a position to cover their descent. The infected were closing, perhaps 30 yards away now, and moving faster as their prey tried to escape. The last child had barely started down the path when headlights suddenly illuminated the road from the north. Vehicles approaching rapidly. Within moments, we were caught between the infected horde and unknown human arrivals. The lead vehicle screeched to a halt and armed figures emerged. Military uniforms, professional movements, not Harris's men. "Get those children clear," a voice shouted. "We'll hold the infected." I hesitated only a moment before following the children down to the beach. Behind us, disciplined gunfire erupted as the soldiers engaged the infected. Not random shooting, but the methodical headshots of trained personnel who understood the threat. On the beach, I gathered the children in a protected hollow beneath the bluff. "Stay here," I instructed. "I'm going to make contact with the soldiers." I climbed back up to the road as the last of the infected fell. A woman in a Navy commander's uniform approached me, her weapon lowered but ready. "Quite a group you've got there," she said. "Where are you headed?" "Bainbridge," I replied. "We heard there's a safe zone." She studied me carefully. "There is. I'm Commander Chen, Bainbridge Security Operations. We were on a supply run when we picked up movement on our perimeter scanners." She gestured towards a device on one of their vehicles. "You're lucky we investigated rather than just reporting it." "The children need safety," I said. "They've been through hell." Chen's expression softened slightly. "We have protocols for accepting survivors, especially children, but I should warn you, adults undergo extensive screening. Not everyone is admitted to the island itself." "What happens to those who don't pass screening?" "Mainland support settlements, less secure, more work, but still protected and supplied. It was better than I had feared. Even if separated from the children, I would be nearby, in a functioning community rather than the savage wilderness we'd been traversing." Commander Chen radioed ahead, then turned back to me. "We'll escort you to the mainland processing center. It's about 15 miles north. We have transport for the children, but you'll need to ride in the bed of the truck." I agreed immediately. After weeks of constant vigilance and danger, the prospect of military protection, even with conditions attached, was overwhelming. The processing center was established in what had been a Coast Guard station before the outbreak. The facility was heavily fortified, concrete barriers, razor wire, guard towers with mounted weapons. Beyond it, across the dark waters of the Sound, the lights of Bainbridge Island glowed. Actual electric lights, a beacon of functioning civilization in the darkened world. The children were taken to a separate area for medical examination and processing. I was directed to an interview room where a military physician and a security officer conducted a thorough screening, medical tests, detailed questioning about my background, verification of my account of our journey from the silo facility. "Harris is known to us," the security officer confirmed. "We've been tracking his operation for months. The information you've provided about his virus experimentation is concerning. It validates several intelligence reports we've received." "What will you do about it?" I asked. "That's classified," she replied automatically, then softened slightly. "But let's just say, his operation has moved up our priority list." After hours of screening, Commander Chen returned with news. "The children have all been cleared for transport to the island. They're in good health, considering what they've been through." "And me?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer from her expression. "You've been approved for mainland assignment," she said. "East Settlement. It's our agricultural center primarily. Good conditions, important work." "How far from the island?" "About 5 miles as the crow flies. Limited visitation is permitted after a 3-month probationary period. 3 months without seeing Ethan. After everything, it felt like an eternity. But I understood their caution. The island was their last best fortress, against the infection. They couldn't risk compromise. "When can I say goodbye to them?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't suppress. "Now," Chen replied. "They're waiting." The children had been cleaned up, given new clothes, fed properly. They looked more like normal children than they had in weeks, except for their eyes, which still held the haunted knowledge of all they had witnessed. Ethan ran to me immediately, throwing his arms around my waist. "They said we're going to the island, that it's safe there." I knelt to his level, holding his shoulders. "Yes, buddy. It's safe. You're going to have a real bed, regular meals, even school again." His smile faltered as he processed my wording. "Aren't you coming too?" I shook my head gently. "I'll be nearby on the mainland. They have different places for adults and children." "But I want to stay with you." His voice rose in distress, drawing the attention of the other children who gathered around us. "It's only temporary," I assured him, though the 3-month separation felt like forever. "You'll be safe on the island. That's what matters most." Tears welled in his eyes. "You promised Mom you'd take care of me." "And I will," I said firmly. "I'll be working just across the water. And then I'll be able to visit." The other children joined in, their voices overlapping in distress and confusion. They had come to rely on me, to trust me as their protector through the nightmare journey. Now at what should have been our moment of triumph, we faced separation. Commander Chen watched the scene with sympathy but remained firm. "The transport leaves in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, but those are the rules." I gathered all 11 children in a tight circle. "Listen to me," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You are the bravest, strongest kids I've ever known. You've survived things most adults couldn't handle. This is just one more challenge." "It's not fair," Sophia protested, tears streaming down her face. "No, it's not," I agreed. "But it's necessary to keep you all safe. And that's what we fought for, remember? Your safety." I looked at each child in turn, memorizing their faces, wanting them to see the pride and love I felt for each of them. "You take care of each other, okay? Just like we've been doing. And when I can visit, you'll tell me all about your new home." Ethan clung to me the longest when the time came for goodbyes. "Don't forget me," he whispered. "Never," I promised. "Not in a million years." I watched from the dock as the transport boat carried them across the dark water toward the island. The children waved until they were too distant to distinguish individually, becoming just small silhouettes against the lights of their new sanctuary. Commander Chen stood beside me in silence until the boat reached the island's dock. "They'll be well cared for," she said finally. "That's a promise." "I'm holding you to that," I replied. The next morning, I was transported to East Settlement, a former state park converted into a sustainable agricultural community. Greenhouses had been constructed to allow year-round food production. Solar arrays and wind turbines provided power. A perimeter fence with guard posts ensured security from infected and hostile humans alike. I was assigned quarters in a converted ranger station, sharing with 3 other adult males. My work detail was crop management, leveraging skills I didn't even know I possessed before the world ended. The routine was strict but reasonable, 8 hours of work daily, with community meals and limited recreational time. It wasn't freedom, but it was stability. Something I hadn't experienced since that fateful day at the port when the container had changed everything. Weeks passed. I worked diligently, earned the respect of my supervisors, made cautious friendships with fellow survivors. Each night before sleep, I looked toward the lights of Bainbridge Island visible across the water, wondering how Ethan and the others were adjusting to their new life. Reports came weekly. All children in good health, attending classes, receiving counseling for their trauma. No names, just statistics, but it was something to cling to. 2 months into my stay at East Settlement, A military convoy arrived unexpectedly. Commander Chen stepped from the lead vehicle and approached me in the fields where I was working. "Mr. Delaney," she called, "a moment of your time." I set down my tools and followed her to a private area away from curious ears. "We conducted an operation 3 days ago," she informed me without preamble, "against Harris's silo facility." My heart raced. "And the facility has been neutralized. Harris is dead. We recovered significant intelligence about his operation and his experiments." She paused, her expression grave, "including evidence that he was involved in the initial outbreak." The revelation struck me with physical force. What? Harris was part of a Black Ops research team at the Nevada facility. They were working on weaponized versions of a virus discovered in Southeast Asian bat populations. When funding was cut, they sold samples to non-state actors. Terrorists, as you surmised. He caused all this? My voice was barely a whisper as I processed the magnitude of the revelation. The global collapse? Billions dead. He was one link in the chain, Chen clarified, but a significant one. And after the outbreak, he continued the work, hoping to develop a controllable version, one that would kill but could be directed, a weapon to reshape the world with himself at the top. I thought of all the lives destroyed, all the children orphaned, all the suffering caused by one man's ambition and arrogance. "Justice, then," I said finally. "Of a sort," Chen agreed, "but that's not why I'm here." She handed me a folder. "Your probationary period has been waived. You've been cleared for immediate relocation to Bainbridge Island." I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What? Why?" "The children," she said simply. "Specifically, a very persistent young man named Ethan. He organized what amounted to a hunger strike among all 11 children from your group, refused to eat unless they could see you." A laugh escaped me, equal parts surprise and pride. "He did what?" "Created quite a stir. Eventually reached the island commander, who reviewed your case, your role in exposing Harris, protecting those children against impossible odds. It was decided that keeping you separated was counterproductive to their emotional recovery." Hope bloomed painfully in my chest. "I can go to the island? Live there permanently?" Chen nodded. "You leave today. Consider it a recognition of service rendered. The reunion at the island dock was a chaos of tears and laughter. All 11 children swarmed me the moment I stepped off the boat, talking over each other, pulling me in different directions to show me their new home. Ethan didn't leave my side. His small hand clutched firmly in mine as if afraid I might disappear again. "I knew you'd come," he said confidently. "I told everyone you would." The island was everything the mainland settlements aspired to be: organized, clean, functioning, schools operated daily, a hospital provided real medical care. Homes had electricity and running water, gardens and communal spaces offered places for recreation and reflection. It wasn't the world before the outbreak. That world was gone forever. Its billions of dead a weight humanity would carry for generations. But here, on this protected island, a seed of civilization persisted, a promise that humanity might yet survive its greatest catastrophe. I was assigned quarters in the family section, a small house with room for Ethan and me, plus 2 of the younger children who had no adult connections. The 4 of us became a makeshift family, bound by shared trauma and survival, but looking cautiously toward a future that might contain more than mere existence. Months passed. I worked in community security, helping to train new arrivals and strengthen our defenses. Ethan thrived in school, his natural leadership qualities emerging in positive ways. Our island population grew steadily as more survivors were located and vetted. Reports from the mainland were encouraging. The massive herds of infected were gradually diminishing as natural decomposition took its toll. Military operations had reclaimed key infrastructure and established more settlements like ours. Communication networks were being restored, linking surviving communities across the continent. It would be years, perhaps decades, before anything resembling the old civilization could emerge from the ashes. The virus remained a threat, immunity still a distant hope rather than a reality. But for the first time since that container had unleashed hell at the Seattle port, the future contained possibilities beyond mere survival. One evening, nearly a year after our arrival on the island, Ethan and I stood on the western shore, watching the sunset paint the Olympic mountains in gold and crimson. The beauty remained, even if humanity's place within it had been forever altered. "Do you think it will ever be normal again?" Ethan asked, voicing the question that haunted all survivors. I considered my answer carefully. "Not like before, but we'll make a new normal. That's what humans do. We adapt, we rebuild, we continue." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. "Me too, buddy, me too." As darkness fell over the Sound, the lights of our island community came on, small beacons of human persistence in a world reclaimed by darkness. We had survived the apocalypse, but the greater challenge lay ahead, building something worthy from the ashes of what was lost. It would be Ethan's generation, these children who had seen the worst of humanity and survived, who would ultimately determine what rose from the ruins. The weight of that knowledge was heavy, but standing beside this resilient child who had become my purpose, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. Fragile, cautious, but real. And for now, that was enough.